Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, hey, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Breaking news. Everyone ready? I got new slime today. I got a new replenishment with new textures of slime to play with on the stream. We've got mushroom garden. We've got watermelon gummy fizz and my favorite blood orange glimmer. I need to get a slime sponsorship. Does someone who makes small batch slime want to sponsor me? I mean, come on. Well, guys, welcome to The Cult. The Cult is a show that I stream Monday through Friday on YouTube, on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, and on Rumble, where we do deep dives into the dystopia that is going on in the world today, focusing predominantly on the far left. Occasionally, we dabble in the far right as well, because they're two sides of the same coin, but because the left controls everything, the left is in the power position, they are actually significantly more dangerous than the right, and so that is where we spend most of our time. We watch full-form trainings. We used to only do this one day a week, and now we do this 6 days a week because we're all obsessed. Occasionally, conservatives come into the chat, and they're like, you libtards, and because they think we're socialists, and then we go, haha, silly conservatives, learn to listen. So we go down some rabbit holes on this channel, and we watch content that quite literally no one who is not a socialist has ever seen on the internet. I'm not making that up. And today we are going to be watching, this is one of those crazy things that I just happened to find on YouTube when I was looking for something else. And it's this small little YouTube channel, SM Rodriguez, with 12 subscribers. And for some reason, on this YouTube channel, SM Rodriguez has been nice enough to curate a whole bunch of stuff from Hofstra University. Probably they were like a student there or something. And specifically, they have this LGBTQ plus studies symposium from 2020. And there's a link over to the Hofstra just to confirm that this is actually from Hofstra University. We have a link over to their website. Now, this is not the first time we've encountered crazy stuff at Hofstra University. In fact, let me show you on the Actively Unwoke Substack. Hofstra. This is not the first time we've encountered a crazy conference at Hofstra University. And if my Substack wants to load, those who remember know that several months ago, we started watching a literal Antifa conference. Hofstra University hosts, and it's still on their YouTube channel today, they hosted a literal Antifa conference. It was an anti-fascist conference. That's literally what it's called. And so we watched a bunch of videos from that last time, and that conference was in November 22nd. And in one of those videos that we watched from the Antifa conference at Hofstra University, we got this economics professor on video saying that fascism is defined as free market capitalism. Oh, see, Chad, I wasn't even paying attention. He's a professor there. Okay. So this is not the first time we've encountered Hofstra. And look, you're right. Chad is right. Dr. S.M. Rodriguez, the director of the LGBTQ plus study. Good spot, Chad. I hadn't even seen that. So apparently back in 2020, within the Department of Sociology and Criminology, which is interesting, they hosted this conference at Hofstra. Yes, like S&M, indeed. Called Deviant Paths, Subversive Futures. In a sociological tradition, deviance describes non-normative actions and performances by individuals. Queerness is one such form of deviance, non-normative, as it describes counter-hegemonic sexual preferences, gender performances, hello, Judith Butler, and community formations. However, deviance can also be understood as mobilized politic. Oh, really? Can also be understood as mobilized politic. One that necessarily resists a reductive social order. DeSantis losing an endorsement to Vivek less than a week before Iowa. Not looking good for him next week. You hate to see it. Yeah, I can't wait to see Ron DeSantis get his ass kicked in Iowa. That's going to be pretty great. Thank you, Naruto. Once a pejorative, queer as a politic or label has been embraced as a way to fight hegemonization, exclusion, limitation, and binaries. Queer signals a political presentation. Oh, it's almost like they're saying, I should make this bigger just so everyone can see it. It's almost like they're saying the quiet part out loud. Queer signals a political presentation, mother effers. Queer is not about being trans. Queer is not about being gay. Queer is not about what you have between your legs. Queer is not about who you sleep with. It's not about who you love. It is not any of those things. Queer only and exclusively signals a political presentation. I don't want to hear any more grief from the horse's mouth. They say it all the time. You just need to listen. Queer signals a political presentation that seeks to undermine dominant ideologies, those which seek to correct, control, and punish difference, and instead offers a way of becoming undone with and through one another. Another way to say that, with and through one another, another way to say that is everyone belongs to everyone else. You are all part of a collective. Through histories of resistance, indefinability and innovation, queerness and queer people have offered their futures, our presence, layers of richness that otherwise may not be afforded. Yet, in addition to acknowledgement and celebration of such deviant past, we must confront the current representational realities that flatten queerness into congealed identities conditionally accepted into the norm. This strikes many as particularly pressing when such norms involve participating in or bolstering regimes of violence, such as neo-imperialism, criminalization, and militarization. Therefore, in a moment when normative discourse, legislation, and media popularize particular images of LGBT identities, histories, journeys, this symposium questions the future of queerness. In growing assimilatory political paradigms, does a collective power, ding, 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 remain for queer identities to subvert, challenge, or destabilize the hegemon? And we have all three presentations from this. And yes, I'm going to make sure we download them and get the archives just in case SM Rodriguez remembers that they do indeed have a YouTube channel and decides to remove these presentations from the internet. But before we do that, we're going to watch one of those presentations today. Now, there are three presentations in this series. The first is queer artistry, performance, and subjectivity. And look what we have here. We've got a professor from Stony Brook University. We've got a professor from UC Berkeley. We've got no more professors. The second panel is decarcerating disability, abolishing gender. It's almost like the goal of queer Marxism is to abolish the gender binary, like I've been saying forever. And decolonizing our future. This has a professor from the University of Illinois at Chicago, a professor from Northwestern University, a professor from Hofstra University, SM Rodriguez themselves, and a professor from Stony Brook University. And then in the third presentation, re-envisioning care. When we hear socialists say the word care, what are they talking about? That's a pop quiz for the chat. When we hear socialists use the word care, what are they talking about? Re-envisioning care, nurture, and hope for a queer future, where we have a gender studies professor from Mount Holyoke College. Look at this. QT BIPOC, queer, trans, BIPOC. And another professor from Stony Brook University, and another professor from Stony Brook University. You guys don't have it so far. When people say care, what are they referring to? Come on. I want a specific thing. Whenever they bring up the term care, it's not, do not give me one word answer that says socialism or capitalism. What are they referring to when they say care? Why do so? You guys know the answer to this. Come on. Bot, it's 5 o'clock. You should damn well be awake. When they say care, what are they referring to? Universal health care? Why? It is true that socialists want universal health care. They want the government to pay for everything, to include all of their transing surgeries. But why? Why are they concerned about care specifically? What does the argument around care allow them to undo? We're going to sit here until you guys get the right answer, because I know you know the answer. Do not give me a one-word answer, James Jones. Don't do that shit. When they are talking about the necessity of universal health care, why the government should pay for it. Tayton is the only... Oh, no, Raven's Poetry got it too. Tayton's and Raven's Poetry are the only two who have been paying attention. The rest of you got work to do, okay? Care means abolish the nuclear family because the nuclear family privatized care. Exactly. Care is delivered within the resources that the nuclear family has, which means different people have different access to different forms of care. Care is delivered when people are little, like children. Care is delivered when people are elderly. Care is delivered when people are sick. And the primary delivery mechanism for that care is the nuclear family. Anytime they're talking about care, they're talking about the nuclear family. Raven's poetry got that as well, destabilizing the family and therefore capitalism. Well done. Exactly, bot. Bourgeois people have better care. See, we're getting more complex, guys. We're asking, I don't want to see this. I don't like, listen, man, we've done a whole year and a half of socialism before this, okay? I don't want to see any more one-word answers when I'm giving you guys a pop quiz. I don't want to see capitalism thrown out as the answer for everything. I don't want to see equity thrown out. I don't want these like you're like throwing a dart hoping that it sticks. I want real fucking answers. You guys can do better. All right? That's the purpose of this. I have high expectations for people who've been around for a while. So, where I wanted to start today is I'm not actually interested as much in this artistry one. Maybe we'll go back and watch it if like the other two pan out, okay? But I want to start with this one, decarcerating disability, abolishing gender, and decolonizing our future. Now, what does decolonization mean? Does decolonization as the conservatives purport? Does decolonization mean violent revolution? Are they saying violent revolutioning our future? Is that what they mean there? Or do they mean something else? Because conservatives are really convinced because of Palestine that decolonization means violent revolution and that's all it means. I don't think that's what it means. Liquid Marble knows what it means. It means removing capitalism. Every time you hear decolonization, it means removing capitalism. That can come in the form of violent revolution, and they're not opposed to violent revolution, but that doesn't mean it has to come in the form of violent revolution, does it? Decolonization means abolishing capitalism ultimately. The elimination of capitalism, abolishing capitalism, getting rid of capitalism, taking the privatized property back from capitalism, getting rid of capitalism and bringing in socialism. Well, okay, so Justin, this isn't an exact answer, but I understand why you said this, because inherently if we are abolishing normativity, which is going to be anything that comes out of capitalism, that would be ushering people into queerness. So I want to give you points for an unorthodox roundabout answer. Not entirely correct, but like definitely like on the right track, and I like how you're thinking about it. Changing capitalism from the inside is what decolonization means. Close Kaiwan. Colonization means pursuing the ideology of deprivatization. I love that one, Tayton. Pursuing the ideology of deprivatization. Well done. So we're going to start with this one. This has a whole bunch of university professors on it, so I think it should be a good one. And maybe tomorrow we'll watch the other one, the third one, if we feel like it. This is an hour and a half long. And then if these two are good, we'll go back and watch the first one and just see what's what. All right? So that's what we have on the docket today, but I do have a couple of things before we get started. Number one, please mount the like button for me. Mounting the like button is one of the ways that you can support the channel, because I am shadow banned to high heaven on YouTube. I have people unsubscribe from my channel all the time on YouTube. I hear people complaining about it. They're like, Carlin, I was unsubscribed from your channel and I didn't unsubscribe. And I'm like, I know YouTube does it all the time. Check to make sure you're subscribed. Turn on those notifications. Mount the like button for me. If you're on Rumble, please make sure you subscribe on Rumble as well. These are really easy things you can do to make sure that YouTube actually serves my content, because it doesn't really like serving my content at all. And so if you want to see my content, that's what you got to do to make sure you see it. And I do appreciate it. I also want to make sure that people are subscribed to my Substack, which is Carlin, KARLYN.substack.com. I posted a couple new articles yesterday. Now, of course, I did post a clip from the spy stream that we did yesterday, where we caught on video live at 10 a.m. in the morning a training that was funded by the mayor's office in Washington, D.C., in which they specifically told people to stop using the language mother, father, brother, sister, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Even niece and nephew, we're not allowed to use niece and nephew anymore. We have to call them nibblings. I'm not joking. That clip is over on the Substack. There's going to be a couple more clips coming up today. You can also access the full training on Substack if you are a member. And if you enjoyed Tuesday's spy stream, not that one, you've got another chance to join Spy Stream tomorrow, because it's a 2 spy stream kind of week, and that means we are going inside another live woke training tomorrow. I already have the information for it, so I think we're pretty good to go with this one. And we are going to be watching, it has to do with race tomorrow, and that's really, it's a training for white people. That's what I'm going to say. We're watching a training for white people who hate themselves for being white tomorrow. That's what I'm going to say. And so that's going to be a supporter exclusive, because all spy streams are now supporter exclusive. You have to be a supporter on Substack, Locals, Patreon, Twitter, YouTube channel member in order to get access to it. Of course, I do prefer that you support me on my Substack, which again is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. And that's going to be $8 a month or $80 a year. As a reminder, I am completely grassroots funded. So that means the amount of stuff that I'm able to expose is directly proportional to the amount of funding that I have. Okay? And so if you want me to keep exposing this stuff, if you want me to keep showing you what's going on, spending all my time watching this stuff, making clips, explaining it, breaking down the ideology, doing all those things, then please make sure to support the work I'm doing, because I cannot do it without you. If I spend time doing this, but no one's supporting it, then I need to go get another job. And I'm fine with doing that. I made way more money in corporate consulting than I make doing this. But this is what I would prefer to be doing right now, because I think this is more important. So if you want to help me out and get access to Spy Stream and get access to my Zoom calls that I do every week and get access to my supporter Discord and all of the perks that come with that, head over to Substack, sign up as a supporter. As a reminder, we also have another event coming up on January 24th, and this is going to be in the evening. This is going to be 9 p.m. I am running again my Learn How to Speak Socialist webinar, which is a private training. It's on a private training platform. And basically, I'm going to run you through a whole bunch of clips that we have pulled out of real live socialist trainings and break down the coded language and explain it to you. So if you're new to me, if you're relatively new to my content and you're feeling overwhelmed by all the socialist language, if you're new to socialism, it's natural to be overwhelmed. This is going to be your crash course in how to speak socialist. Am I ever going to do a level 3? I don't know about level 3. I'm definitely going to do a level 2. I probably will get to level 3 at some point, bot, but we're building it out as we go. And so if you want to join that on January 24th at 9 p.m. Eastern time, I will break it all down for you. I will overwhelm you with information, but I've got it set up in a way now where it makes a lot of sense. If you were in the training I did in October, I'm adding new clips to it. I'm breaking it down a little bit differently because I learned a lot from doing this training the first time, and I think it's going to get even better and better and better. Please make sure you share this out with your friends and family. Please make sure. And if it's like Jake here, who is in the UK, so I understand why that's too late, I would recommend, Jake, that you sign up anyway, because you will get a video replay emailed to you as soon as the video is processed. So you might not be able to be there live, but you can still do the training. And so sign up anyway, get the video replay, do it when it's convenient for you. Sadly, I can't hit all time zones. It's just the way it goes. The training is completely free, but you can make a donation if you feel so inclined. And of course, I do appreciate it. Breaking news, Chris Christie is dropping out. Oh my word. I know we are all shocked at the revelation that Chris Christie is not going to be the next president of the United States. Liquid Marble says, before we start, I'd like to say that I started listening to your Actively Unwoke podcast because there was a clip on your YouTube channel and I like it. That's actually a really good point, Liquid Marble. I did relaunch last night my Actively Unwoke podcast. Now, I have about 44 episodes that I recorded over the last couple years of the Actively Unwoke podcast, and then I took a long ass break. It wasn't intentional. I just had a lot of stuff going on, okay? But I have relaunched the podcast. You can find it on the Substack. And if you go over to podcast on the Substack, That will get you all of the back episodes of the podcast, and you can also subscribe to it on Apple, on like in Apple, iTunes, like whatever, Apple Podcasts, and you can also subscribe to it on Spotify. And so if you guys want to subscribe to the podcast, please go ahead. The thing I posted last night is basically me expanding on this idea of like, did DEI die because Harvard's president resigned, or because conservatives got Harvard's president to resign? I'm going to argue no, but I explain why in the podcast and give you a lot more information about that. Tayton says, the new episode I released was spot on. Thank you, Tayton. I like to think so. So that is the free podcast associated with my Substack. You can, of course, always find it on the Substack under podcast, or you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any of those things as well. And I appreciate you guys listening. I do plan on regularly releasing podcast episodes this year because it is something that I do want to revive. And actually, fun fact, a lot of effing people listen to that podcast. Even when I wasn't posting anything, like thousands of people every single month listen to that podcast. Which is kind of cool, actually. It means that people are searching for this content. They're finding it, they're using it, even stuff I posted 2 years ago, which is pretty damn cool. All right. Do I have anything else? No, I think that's it for today. I think that's it. Let's see. Can everyone please mount the like button for me before we get started? I mean, come on, guys. Like, this is not hard. If you can't mount the like button, you don't really want to beat the left. I mean, come on. Yes, I have a much more soothing voice in the podcast. I do podcast voice, radio voice for the podcast. All right. We are watching Deviant Past, Subversive Futures, Decarcerating, Abolishing, and Decolonizing from Hofstra University. Let's get this party started.
Hi, my name is Dr. S.M. Rodriguez. I am the director of the LGBTQ Studies program at Hofstra University. On April 23rd, 2020, Hofstra University hosted its 7th LGBTQ Studies Symposium. However, for the first time, it was virtual. Co-sponsored by the Department of Sociology and Criminology program, the Center for Race, Culture, and Social Justice, Student Access Services, and the Hofstra Cultural Center,
I bet they're non-binary.
10 scholars, activists, and artists respond to the question posed by the symposium title, Deviant Past, Subversive Futures. The 3 panels were recorded and are offered here. Panel 1 was titled Queer Artistry, Performance, and Subjectivity. Panel 2, Decarcerating Disability, Abolishing Gender, and Decolonizing Our Future. Panel 3, Re-envisioning Care, Nurture, and Hope for a Queer Future.
I'm playing with the blood orange glimmer slime first. This talk begins through. Oh, okay. I was like, we have to wait 3 fucking minutes.
That condemn trans people of color to deaf worlds. Under colonial domains, these predeterminations are necropolitical in nature.
Oh, this is going to be
mark
great.
Trans of color bodies, and especially Black and brown trans women and those perceived as such, as only deserving of early death, living while dead, or inhabiting other realms of death. Considering decoloniality as praxis, a necessity in trans of color liberation projects, my aim in this work is to highlight the ways discourses centering trans people of color tend to orbit around the perpetuality of death. I first noticed this trend while reflecting upon my own work's preoccupation with trans of color mortality. In decolonizing work, I relied so heavily on analyses of the necropolitical that concepts of the possibilities of life had escaped me. To affirm my observations, I conducted these general searches for the key terms Black transgender women, transgender of color, and their variations on Google and Google Scholar, set to my current region in the Northeast. So I did this because I wanted to conduct both general and scholarly searches on these platforms to confirm what I have noticed in both popular culture and in published journal articles. As these search engines have ostensibly become the default for most with internet access, my thinking is that search results might convey the content on trans of color ontology that is most easily accessed by the public.
Oh,
not to my surprise.
Actually, Rottweiler is making a good point. Rottweiler is making a good point. So we didn't get an introduction because apparently they screwed up in the recording. So we did not get an official introduction to the candidates. However, we can still do a poll and we can decide, hang on, who's going to say capitalism first? 1, 2, hang on. I'm setting up the poll. I put my keyboard on the floor, so I have to use my laptop keyboard. 1, 2, 3, or 4. All right, who is going to say capitalism first? Is it going to be contestant number 1 in the upper left-hand corner? Is it going to be contestant number 2, SM Rodriguez? Is it going to be contestant number 3, this guy in the lower left-hand corner? Or is it going to be contestant number 4, the they, them in the lower right-hand corner? Please register in the poll which one you think is going to say capitalism first. And if you feel so inclined, also put your selection in the chat to make an official selection. We're going to hold you to it. No takesies, backsies. We're going to get a capitalism today, guys. I feel very confident that someone is going to say capitalism today. I know we were all left disappointed yesterday. We were edged to within an inch of our sanity, and it just didn't happen. The climax never came, but I really do feel like we're going to get our climax today, guys. And I want everyone to go nuts when we hear our first capitalism. Is it going to be 1, 2, 3, or 4? Register your votes now.
I found top searches in news, magazine, and nonprofit organization websites to have headings that almost always position trans women of color in high proximity to domestic violence, discrimination, the epidemic of death and murder, HIV and AIDS, and themes of crisis and risk. News publications in particular tend only to dehumanize subjects in the graphic recounting of attacks and deaths, and contribute to dominant narratives that define trans of color bodies as perpetually troubled, diseased victim, and always already condemned to a limited time on Earth. The top searches for academic articles did not differ much in that the pieces focused on discrimination, depression, homelessness, familial rejection, lack of access to services, mental and physical health issues, negative media portrayals, and again, we see these terms such as risk behavior and HIV risk. Scholars, though, did not just state the struggles of trans people of color, but managed to grasp at the possibilities of life worlds through notions of overcoming and resiliency. These publications on trans of color and markedly Black trans people uplift the value of our bodies, but oftentimes do so.
Yes, Stony Baloney is correctly pointing out that they're reading a paper. This is oftentimes what you're going to see at socialist presentations. I even saw it at the socialism conference where they read their paper. Everyone goes and reads their paper. It's a pre-prepared speech. And then they have a conversation about the paper. And then they take questions about the paper. And this is why, like, the most fruitful stuff with socialist presentations tends to come when they start to deviate from their papers, because the papers are like their prepared wording, but once they have to go off script and they have to think off the top of their heads, that's when they really start to say the quiet part out loud. So we have to listen to the papers because we don't know what they're going to say. But when they start talking to each other and answering questions, that tends to be when we get into like the really, really good stuff. Sin, I'm playing with the blood orange glimmer slime right now, and it's fabulous. So thick.
Within or indirect relation
Thank
to
you, Benjamin. Appreciate
denouncing
it.
the culprits of our misery. We may conceptualize this journey as a politics of resurrection, which involves travel through realms of death to grasp at realms of life. Although I use this tactic often in my work, like when I explore the transversal nature of Black embodiment through the transatlantic slave trade to articulate Black consciousness as communally subsistent,
What the
I
fuck?
find it troublesome that the most common routes we take to bolster prospects of life are made accessible only through pathways of death. This constructs an essence of being encapsulated by proximity to struggle. My aim here is not to critique the foundational work scholars have contributed to trans of color studies, nor to question the reason behind studying the systemic condemnation of our bodies to realms of death. We study death because it is the real and the experienced. My uneasiness rather lies in the perception of trans of color existence as in a perpetual state of devastation, supported by the overwhelming prevalence of literature and public discourse discussing them in these contexts. While the sources I considered raised awareness about trans of color violence in order to uplift their worthiness of life, what may translate to subjects themselves is that they exist within a preconceived, predetermined, and inevitable order of things, in which their bodies and embodiments are only defined as in a mode of survival, with Black trans women in
See, people ask me all the time when I'm trying to explain socialist coded language, they ask me all the time, they're like, "Carlin, did they really understand that's what they mean?" And I'm like, and they say like, how did they learn this?" And I'm like, "You don't understand. These people are in immersive environments where this is the language that they use. This is a symposium where these people are presenting to each other in their native tongue. This is the language that they use with each other. And so do all socialists understand the definitions that we talk about? Yes. Because they use this language with each other all the time. This is the world that they're in. They only talk to other people who speak this language. Conservatives don't understand this, and people who aren't immersed in this cult don't understand this because they are not in this environment. They have been exposed to this language from the time they're kids. Their parents probably speak this language. Everyone they go to school with speaks this language. People who are not in this environment need to have it decoded for them, because it's like, you can only, like, the best way to learn a language is by immersion, right? It's like if you want to learn French, you go to Paris for 6 months and you will speak French by the time you leave, because that's just the way it works. You're going to immerse yourself in the culture, you're going to immerse yourself in the language, and you're not going to know what's going on at first, and everyone's going to sound like they're speaking gibberish, but by the time you leave, you will learn how to speak French. It's the same with socialists. So right now, we are seeing a group of socialists in their native environment speaking their native tongue to each other. And so if it sounds crazy and you don't know what they're saying, this guy is a little bit complex, or this they, them is a little bit complex. And so if it sounds like gibberish and word salad, just sit with it, ask questions in the chat. And I promise you, we're going to get to some golden nuggets today. I can already tell. Yes, Prometheus is correct. And because a lot of these programs are interdisciplinary, they are constantly exposed, so they get constant training in the language. All of these people understand what this person is saying. We might not understand it, but all of them do. And by listening to it and just really letting it sit, we're going to be able to decipher what they're actually saying.
Constant confrontation with the statistic that they will likely be murdered before age 35. This distancing of the death world as one of the only realms of possibility will make space to sway closer to radical imaginaries in which Black and brown trans lives do not exist solely in the domains of the dead or the living dead.
Hang on. Oceana says, 5 years ago, I first heard this newspeak. It is newspeak at a Washington State affirmative action board sponsored by the governor. I guarantee our governor doesn't know what it means either, but he gave it money. So here is the thing. In Washington State, he probably did know. But this is the reason that we watch socialists and we learn to speak socialist, because once you learn their language, it starts to show up everywhere. It shows up everywhere. And when it starts to show up in your real life, like when you're out at a committee meeting or you're at a library or you're at your kid's school, or like it shows up for me in the movies. Like I go to the movies, they play those commercials before the movie starts, and like they're speaking socialist in the movie commercial. And I'm like, yep, okay, Indeed.com is socialist. Got it. Like when it starts to show up everywhere, you start to see everything differently, and you start to see how pervasive this ideology really is.
However, this does not mean we abject the study of trans violence, necropolitics, and death worlds, as they are necessary to make sense of the ways in which coloniality shapes all domains of our existence. While I caution an approach to necropolitical analyses that help to eternalize trans of color subjectivity as in a perpetual state of suffering, I do believe to be rooted in knowledges of the violent lived realities of our people is imperative in projects of imagining worlds otherwise. In addition, we must remain intimately aware of the inevitability of the violent nature of radical refusal in the corporalization of our own destinies. This nuanced understanding will not only help to craft our responses to this threat of non-life, but also to transcend the essentialized ontology of persistence through struggle. In order to effectively generate alternate trans of color futurities, or at least to conceptualize the multiplicity of our options for futures, we must not only engage in the demolition of the colonial institutions that oppress us, such as the gender sex binary, afterlives of slavery, white supremacy, and
there it is. There it is. We just got a clip, guys. Hang on, hang on, hang on. I'm going to clip this. Did anyone hear what he said? We must decolonize the institutions that oppress us, like the gender binary. And then he named white supremacy as well. And of course, white supremacy means capitalism. And he almost said capitalism. Maybe he will. We're going to get this clip. Let's just see where he goes. But I just want to make sure I've got my, hang on, I got to change my clipping configuration because I changed it earlier. Hang on. It's going to take just a hair longer because I got to get it right. All right, we're clipping this. Come on, record, mother effer. There it goes. Okay.
Centralized ontology of persistence through struggle. In order to effectively generate alternate trans of color futurities, or at least to conceptualize the multiplicity of our options for futures, we must not only engage in the demolition of the colonial institutions that oppress us, such as the gender sex binary, afterlives of slavery, white supremacy, and global westernization, but also transcend survivability in our task of beginning anew. This involves a radical imagination that assists in the manifestation of worlds of possibility. Imagination and subsequent manifestation of these future life worlds require the doer to embody states of consciousness that embrace intangibilities, metaphysicalities, subdued potentialities of knowing and being, and the notion that multiple, malleable, permeable realities alternative to the one in which we consciously live do not exist that far from the realm of possibility.
All right. So this is one of those things that, like, this is why James Lindsay thinks that all these people are Gnostics, because they say stuff like that, like they have secret knowledge. But James Lindsay doesn't adequately understand woo. He doesn't understand spirituality, and so he thinks that all of this stuff is Gnostic when it's not. All right, I got my clip. Let's keep going.
Transformative justice, mutual aid networks, and FTP, which may stand for fuck the police, fuck the prisons, and or free the people. Coalitions are examples of world-making practices that cultivate other ways of living and doing ungoverned by coloniality.
Coloniality means capitalism.
Justice initiatives, for example, establish alternatives to state-sanctioned intervention in cases where someone has been harmed or has done harm in one's community. This no-nonsense anti-state approach proposes an alternative way of resolving conflict through healing practices, away from the state's default response, which is to mark deviant and incarcerate. Mutual aid networks also abject reliance on the government for community well-being. Especially as the COVID-19 pandemic continues, community members and activist groups have offered assistance with tasks and free
The hell?
deliveries for those who are unable to do the labor themselves. Instead of government channels, word is spread through flyers on sidewalks and inside apartment buildings, posts online, and word of mouth. Taking the well-being of one's local community into the hands of the collective symbolizes a radically imaginative act in which people of a shared socio-geographic location together craft these matrices of care, in which racial capitalism does not drive the performance of services for other people.
Capitalism. 10 minutes into the presentation, number one wins. I feel like it's a win by default. I feel like all of them are going to say capitalism. But number one, who voted number one? I know we had number 3 was the winner of the poll, but like it's a little unfair, really. It's a little unfair. 25% of you got the right vote. It's unfair because he's the only one that's spoken, or they, them is the only one that's spoken so far. If your chosen person says capitalism, you should still consider yourself a winner today, because I think they're all going to say it. Well done, everyone who chose number 1. You got it. See, the number 1 was the strategic choice, though. It was like they're the first one speaking. It means capitalism, Kyle. That's what it means. It means capitalism, which means private property ownership. It means capitalism. And what global West, this is a term they very rarely use. This is actually the first time in probably a year I've heard them use this. So Kyle, don't fucking think that just because you heard them say westernization one time in the thousands of hours of stuff that we've watched on my channel, that they mean Western civilization, which conservatives say mean white people. Like, anytime you hear conservatives say Western civilization, Western values, they mean white people, skin color. Not white people capitalism, white people skin color. When they say it, they mean capitalism, which is private property ownership. That's what they mean. Yes, Western, that does not mean Western kind. These are completely different languages. Conservatives are always desperate. They're like, but they said Western, Nope. They don't mean the same. They're like, but they said Western. I'm like, no, they didn't say it in the right context. You're not listening for the contextual clues. I know you just want to feed your confirmation bias. But no, that's not what they meant.
FTP coalitions also radically imagine other planes of existence away from the normative order of prisons, police, and the commodification of the basic necessities of life like public transit. In the same frame, I want to prioritize the creation of potentialities that reach far beyond comprehension within a white Western state of consciousness. At the very least, this challenges us to unsettle the intimate relationship we have with the colonial.
See, this is how we know that when they say Western, they mean capitalism. On the rare occasion, again, this person has already said Western more than I've heard Western in like an entire year. And this was in 2020, so it may just been a couple years ago thing. But like he's saying white Western. We know that white for these people means capitalist. Rottweiler says they can argue they are epistemic Gnostics in the sense they would operate with a high epistemic certitude. People should drop the Gnostic label. It obfuscates and confuses people without philosophical training. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that James Lindsay advances that confuses normal people and then just muddies the whole situation. I do appreciate the super chat, Rottweiler.
At least this challenges us to unsettle the intimate relationship we have with the coloniality responsible for what we are told is real, as opposed to the imaginary and therefore unattainable. In making these Black and brown trans worlds anew, I caution against the involvement of those who have conjured, deployed, or severely benefited from bio and necropolitical, techno-industrial, excavatory modernities that mark trans of color lives disposable. In a similar sense, in his book, The Black Radical Imagination, Robin D.G. Kelly emphasizes he is interested in Black people's ideas of new and alternate worlds in particular, and not the construction of Black communities whose regional, social, and ideological domains are governed by white liberal capitalist values.
Capitalism. White liberal
Like Kelly,
capitalist
I am
values.
hesitant to enlist white people with the
Hang on. White liberal capitalist values. Where this is massive word salad, Trendle, and we're just gonna have to work our way through it, okay? I understand. White liberal capitalist values. There are a couple things I want you to notice about this. First of all, he is again they them, because I'm pretty sure that's a girl. Like they them is associating white with capitalist again. So now we've seen that twice within a couple minutes, and also liberal. Why are you seeing liberal show up in that? Why are they specifically enumerating white, which means capitalist, liberal, capitalist values? They're talking about capitalism and the beneficiaries of capitalism. White privilege means beneficiary of capitalism. They're talking about liberal because they are not liberals. They hate liberals. Liberals aren't socialists. They think liberals are their enemies. Nope. Wrong. That's not correct. The Democrats are too capitalist for them because communists consider liberals to be just as bad as conservatives. This is why every time a conservative says, well, the Democratic Party has basically been taken over by socialists. No, wrong. No, they haven't. Liberal for a Marxist is someone who doesn't have socialist discipline. It's a Maoist talking point. They don't see liberals as their allies because liberals are often capitalists. Exactly. Liberal prioritizes the individual versus the collective. Exactly, Prometheus. Well done.
Like Kelly, I am hesitant to enlist white people with the task of imagining new worlds.
That means capitalist.
As they may too easily reconstitute new forms of modernity or another new world, capital N, capital W. Thinking more about my...
Jake, the only people who distinguish between liberals and classical liberals are conservatives who are pretending to be libertarians. Those are the only people who use the only people who use the term classical liberal are conservatives who are pretending to be libertarians.
Hesitation to enlist whites in this decolonial task, I look to the tangible spaces where white Western queers have imagined and institutionalized their new worlds outside of cis heteropatriarchy and homo-nationalism.
Jake, you've used several times now, and I appreciate that you're showing up. I appreciate you showing up for Spy Stream. I appreciate you like supporting this and all that stuff. But this is like I've seen you throw this around several times that you're an academic. That, I mean, to be honest, like, I don't care. I don't care what academics say. I don't care about the philosophy papers. I don't care. This is about learning from people who are teaching this to other people in the real world. Are these people academics? Sure, that it's taking place in a college context, but what I care about is only and exclusively what these people are teaching and what they're doing in the real world. And so I don't care about whatever framework you have in whatever philosophy class you took that time. I don't care about the academic paper that was written 200 years ago. I don't care about any of that. That is not what we're doing here.
Here, I am referencing the ways in which white queers, who oftentimes have access to social and monetary capital,
beneficiary of
establish
capitalism,
event spaces, organizations, media presences, and corporations that usually end up
Hang on.
perpetuating damaging colonial rhetoric.
So I just want, so basically this is a little bit of a, we're going to go so slow through this. I can already see. So what this person just said is an example of how the term white privilege means beneficiary of capitalism. Another way you might see that is by saying this person has access to private property, which means resources that are not available to the collective. It means they have access to money, they have access to resources, they have access to support, they have access to things that like you need to pay for. That's what they mean when they say beneficiary of capitalism, is you have access to private property that requires money, connections, resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that are not available to the general public. So what you're going to hear this person say is the white queers have, it's essentially like, we don't want to include the white queers, which means capitalist, beneficiary of capitalism. He's going to say they have access to resources, but they have too much propensity to go back to like the capitalist system because they have access to those resources. So this clip is going to confirm that white privilege means beneficiary of capitalism. It's a little bit complex, but I want everyone to listen for it, and then I want you to let me know if you have questions about it in the chat.
Patriarchy and homo nationalism. Here, I am referencing the ways in which white queers, who oftentimes have access to social and monetary capital,
white queers who have access to social and monetary capital. So that's what he means by white, that they have access to social and monetary capital.
Establish event spaces, organizations, media presences, and corporations that usually end up perpetuating damaging colonial rhetoric.
So with their access to social and monetary capital, they end up establishing things that perpetuate capitalism. Does everyone understand what you just heard? Does anyone have questions? I know this is complicated. All right, we're going to keep going. If you have questions, please ask.
Although the shift from binary gay to an increase in queer and trans-friendly spaces appears to translate to notions of progress, these progressive acts are surface-level attempts at diversity that divert our attention from the seat coloniality always has at the table.
Capitalism.
Unlike white queers' exertion of modernity, trans people of color's familiarity with the violent repercussions of racism, sexism, queerphobia, and more equip us with a double or multi-consciousness that aids in imagining new worlds that can transcend the coloniality of being, knowledge, and power. The fact is, though, any person who lives in a society...
Well, Rottweiler, what I think he's saying, they, them is saying, excuse me, I think they, them is referencing general LGBT people when he says queer. So it's like he's referencing, because remember, this was back in 2020, so their language has evolved a little bit more since then. But let me know if this rings true. He's referencing gay people, like LGBT people, who are still participating in capitalism. And that's what he's defining as white queer. So he's trying, they, them is trying to get everyone like that's LGBT under the queer umbrella, and also saying they're white at the same time, to almost say like, you're not one of us, but you really should be one of us. Do you know what I mean? It's referencing someone who is still a capitalist, still is a beneficiary of capitalism, still is participating in the capitalist system, but isn't really fully one of them yet because they are still involved in capitalism. White queer, is that a roundabout way of saying grifter? No, it's not. It's a roundabout way of saying capitalist, Liz. I do appreciate the question. There's a concept by academic Cheryl Harris called "Whiteness is Property." Yeah, we've watched this, Oceania. We watched this. We watched this whole presentation. There are clips of it on the Substack. And by the way, when she says whiteness is property in that speech, Cheryl Harris explicitly says whiteness is not about skin color. She explicitly says that whiteness needs to be seen connected to capitalism, and she explicitly says that Black people can be white too. But we've watched this already. There's a whole bunch of them too. I almost watched some of them today. So LGBT people who don't consider themselves as queer or Marxist, therefore people like myself, yes, essentially. It's like someone who should be a Marxist but doesn't know it yet, sort of thing. They're like still inadvertently perpetuating the systems of capitalism.
Constituted by colonial standards of normality, colonized and colonizer alike, are susceptible to reconstituting new forms of modernity. In radically imagining these alternate worlds, we must also acknowledge that performances of and orientations to colonialist ontology and knowledge systems exert modernity in different ways, in different places and spaces. Ultimately, to approach decolonizing trans of color futures involves both grounding our knowledges in necropolitical.
Prometheus, you're knocking it out of the park lately, bro. Using white as an adjective to queer is saying that you should be with our group, but you are acting in ways that are opposed to us. That's exactly right. It's like they're saying you should be on the far left ideology bandwagon. You should be a socialist, but you're still acting in ways that are opposed to socialism. So we've got a little bit more work to do on you, and we don't exactly trust you yet, and you're not a comrade yet, but maybe we'll use you in a way that's like convenient for us, but you're not a full comrade yet because you don't fully embrace the ideology and you're still perpetuating capitalism.
Realities and the potentialities of pluriversal worlds. Trans of color consciousness in this sense serves as a locus point through which to comprehend possibilities.
Jake, this is why I'm being hard on you, bro. This is why I'm being hard on you. Because you come in, you've set yourself up as an academic that's studying this stuff. What do they mean when they say white? Do they mean skin color? No, that's not what that means. That's not what that means. I don't interpret it like that. Then why are you saying it in a way that implies skin color? If you know that they don't mean skin color, then why are you saying it in a way that implies skin color? Correct. I know you know this stuff, bro. I know you do.
Transcend colonial regulations, locate subdued imaginaries, and to embark on re-existent futures. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much, Kai. So it's actually a great, well, you'll see the connections and we'll talk about these connections soon. So let me put on my
connections.
Let's see.
I feel like we've seen this guy in the lower left-hand corner before, by the way. I don't know where, though.
Somehow I have managed to lose my talk. Okay, so my talk is called The Queer Politics of Women's Engagement and Mislabeling in Prisons. And I want to offer, I guess, a few content warnings ahead of time because toward the end of the talk, I will be talking about miscarriage and death and referencing a few things that happened in this particular case that I'm discussing here. So I'm looking specifically at a book that was recently published called No Roses from My Mouth, Poems from Prison that was published by Stella Nyansi. So in No Roses from My Mouth, Stella Nyansi, a recently released political prisoner in Kampala, Uganda, pens 158 poems from Luzira Women's Prison.
Exactly, Oceania.
The feminist warriors'
Exactly.
diatribe takes the form of largely unedited,
They're trying to impress each
unpretentious
other.
protest odes. In it, she offers 3 volumes.
What this is like? This is like the ladies in the South that get all dressed up to go to church, and they all have their church hats and their church outfits, and everyone's trying to have the best church outfit because they're trying to impress each other. It's the same thing. The more verbose they get with their language, the bigger the hat is, right? They're fucking peacocking.
Each broken into 3 parts. Each part 1 relating to life in prison, each part 2 relating to feminism, and each part 3 about Uganda. Despite this provided organization, the interwoven messages of Nyansi's thoughts prevail, as can be seen in the brilliant poem Weaver of Mats, which was a poem that exposes the exploitation of women's prison labor in Uganda, undoubtedly a feminist, anti-carceral, and Ugandan issue. In a review that I recently published with The Conversation Africa last month, I focused on 2 of 5 major themes that I identified in the book. The review proposed alternative foci, first looking into Nyansi's patriotic or revolutionary motherhood. The second, looking at Nyansi's portrayal of criminalization as the perverse upward distribution of women's labor, and an unjust focus on locking up the poor and the nuisance. This talk will focus on the queer gender and sexual politic presented, and how Nyansi's poetic account demonstrates greater faults of carceralism, particularly in its existence as a tool to consign certain bodies to early deaths, which is the very definition of racism offered by Ruth Wilson Gilmore, or necropolitics by Sheila Mbembe.
Ruth Wilson Gilmore, socialist.
So first, it's really important to situate the prison in Uganda, as well as the currently understood binary gender scheme, as colonial inventions. The land that,
she just said, or they them just said, we need to see the current binary gender scheme as an invention, as a colonial invention. Colonial means capitalism. We're not going to clip this. I just want you to hear it again. No, back.
Uganda, as well as the currently understood binary gender scheme as colonial inventions. The land that, as well as Uganda itself, to be honest, the land that Luzira Women's Prison sits on is within the Kingdom of Uganda, which is a kingdom that exists today and should be acknowledged even within our contemporary understanding of the nation state, Uganda, that was established by merging this kingdom with roughly 13 other kingdoms and chiefdoms. Penal institutions in Uganda began that year, or began the year that it was established as a protectorate.
Okay, check this out. Okay, so we talked earlier about how colonization means that you're taking land that was previously part of the collective and is generally related to like indigenous cultures, and you're taking that land and you're privatizing it under the oppressive force of capitalism, right? That's what colonialization means. Decolonization is when you take the land back from the capitalist oppressors, okay? What this person just talked about is that Uganda basically took a whole bunch of land from these other chiefdoms and they colonized it under the oppressive force of capitalism. Did everyone hear that? Let's just go back. And I don't know the inner workings of like African politics or anything, but what I do know is what this person is saying is there was all this land that belonged to indigenous cultures. And those indigenous cultures were like, the land was taken from those indigenous cultures and then brought together under the colonizers to create Uganda. Let's just listen. You guys let me know if you have any questions.
Acknowledged even within our contemporary understanding of the nation state, Uganda, that was established by merging this kingdom with roughly 13 other kingdoms and chiefdoms.
That's
Penal
colonization.
institutions in Uganda began the year that it was established as a protectorate,
Read
colony
colony.
of the United
See?
Kingdom in 1894. This time,
See? So the land was distributed among the 13 tribes, and then the evil colonizers came in and they privatized the land under the oppressive force of capitalism, and then it's colonization.
timing reflects the global exploitation of prisonization, which of course was carried by Western coloniality in the 19th century. Luzira is the only maximum security prison in the country, and it is where Stella Nyansi survived after a series of arrests for cyber harassment of the president and first lady by referring to President Museveni, the Ugandan president, as a pair of buttocks in a poem that she wrote in 2017. In her time, she wrote and smuggled out these fugitive poems, which will forever serve the Ugandan
Fugitive
Queer
pedagogy, smuggler pedagogy.
Here's an excerpt from A Dark Kiss, which is a poem in the third volume, written last December, December 2019, in the second sectionism on feminism. Excerpt. I saw you kissing desperately. When the electricity blacked out, two lonely prisoners locked up for years in Ward 2, seated close to each other, sitting on the cold prison floor, chatting about this and that, yearning, desiring, longing, missing a lover's touch, missing tenderness, heterosexual.
Mountain Goddess, I want you to answer your own question. You've been around long enough that you should be able to answer your own question. Do they believe and everyone else can answer this question too. Do they believe historically that colonialism was only created by white people? I'd like to see Mountain Goddess try to answer this, but I want to see other people answer it too. Everyone who's been around a long time should know the answer to this. Do they believe historically that colonialism was only created by quote unquote white people? I want everyone to answer this, and I just don't want to hear yes or no's. I want an explanation for why you're answering the way you are. Colonialism is another synonym for capitalism, just like whiteness. Westcott, Peascott. Now Mountain Goddess, try to answer again. You just said you're not sure, so we've given you a hint now. Colonialism is another synonym for capitalism, just like whiteness. Mountain Goddess, what does white mean? You should know this. What does white mean? Because and the reason I say this, and I'm a little aggravated, is that you seem to be talking about white as though you're talking about skin color. And if that's really what you think white means, you're not listening, and you've been around long enough that you should know this. Rottweiler, thank you for the super chat. Maybe we'll come across some talk regarding India and the British occupation, because India is being queered real fast. Plus the fact that the caste system is something they are using to accomplish it. Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of talks from India, Rottweiler. I mean, like, maybe I'm just being like racist. I don't like watching like talks from India. I don't like it. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to suffer through it, but colonization is a synonym for privatization of property. Right. So you know that white means capitalism, and you know that colonization is another synonym for capitalism, just like whiteness. So, with those things in mind, do they believe historically that colonialism was only created by whites? You know that whiteness means capitalism. You know that colonialism is another synonym for capitalism. So now answer your own question. You're not listening. You're not listening. I'm just going to let that sit. We're going to keep going, but you have every single thing you need to answer your own question. The only reason you're not answering your own question is because you're not listening.
On the outside, lesbian on the inside, lesbian tonight.
Well, that's not what's been said, but we're making progress.
In Volume 2, Part 2, also a section that's dedicated to feminist issues, is Sappho Opportunities.
Hang on. Guys, are we going full retard again today? Truly? Like, is that what's happening? Because we're already watching a really complex talk today, and if you guys can't get the basics that white means capitalism, I just don't know what to say. Kansas Mama, you have been around long enough to know better. I need every single person in this chat to beat the idea out of their system that skin color has to do with any of this. Like, I feel like I'm just going to start timing people out that have been here for a while, honestly. Like, are you guys trolling? Are you guys fucking serious? I understand her thought process about white being used in place of capitalist because the narrative about whites taking over America from natives. You're saying it like it's skin color. What, guys? This is why I go insane. Because people who have been in my chat for fucking months still cannot understand that skin color has nothing to do with this and still keep referencing it as though it's skin color. And then I have to explain the same fucking thing over and 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 over again until fucking everyone else in the chat is sick of it. Colonialism equals privatization of property, meaning capitalism, or instituting capitalism. Do they believe that whites instituted colonialism? Yes. Because whiteness means capitalism. White and black equals red and black in Mao's China. I mean, Tayton, we're not going to go down that road right now. I do appreciate the super chat, but we're not going down that road. If I can't get people to understand that white does not mean skin color, we're not going down that fucking road. If you understand why she thinks it means white, that means that you're not listening and she's not listening, and you're both self-reinforcing that it's okay not to listen.
Meet me in the bathroom when inmates are watching favorite soaps, the bathroom bulb blue. We can soap each other's bodies, rub our bodies together, and finger long forgotten pathways. This time around, I'll be gentle with your nipples. Meet me in the chicken house when inmates are attending fellowship prayers. The coffee husks on the floor are fresh. We can lie on their cushion. Make love like two rabbits. Our moans will be drowned by the clucks. This time is your turn to look out for snitches and peeping toms. Meet me at the back of the classrooms when inmates meet for school parade. The guard posted their dozes. We can stealthily tiptoe past her. I will kiss your imprisoned lips, and rain will fall from your fountain. Stolen kisses between women prisoners make us human.
Rain will fall from your fountain. That's an interesting way of saying getting
These poems reveal the queer side of the prison, queer not as in identity, but as in a relentless desire to survive and grasp on to intimacy and wholeness, even if, or maybe especially if, it defies the norm for the individual or the society. When Uganda and lesbian are written together, it's almost never by those who experience and express the transcendent potential of queerness in that context. If it were, it would read like this: sensual, effervescent, human. Instead, it's almost always written from a white gaze, which eyes new legislation without eyeing history, which condemns an abstract oppression without condemning the institutions, the very institutions, those of police.
So that porn, that porn poetry that she just read, she says like the white gaze would never write such a thing because it comes from a place of oppression.
Policing and of imprisonment built to oppress and sustained by the very colonial government superficially condemning anti-gay politics today. These poems offer a very real place. Within that,
we are still in full fucking retard mode, I see. There are straight white men that are involved in every single socialist event that I have covered. They have no problem with straight white men. The only people that think these people do have a problem with straight white men are retarded fucking conservatives who want to convince themselves that they are poor fucking victims of the fucking world because they're white men. This is a conservative perception because they want to be victims that has nothing to do with what these people say and do in the real fucking world. Do you understand? Because I'm so sick of this fucking bullshit. This is not hard. Go to their fucking events, bro. Why don't you take it upon yourself? If you're such a big, strong, fucking white man, go to their fucking events, go undercover like I do, and you will see they have straight white men everywhere because they don't give a flying fuck if you are a straight white man. They care whether or not you are a socialist. And if you can't wrap your head around that, and you keep fucking complaining that white men are poor victims of the fucking world, but it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It has nothing to do with what they're saying. You are a fucking retard that is unhinged from reality. Well, I just don't agree. I really think that white men are poor victims of the world. We are the most victimized people in the history of the fucking world, and therefore everyone has to see that white men are the biggest fucking victims in the fucking world. Stop being fucking retarded. And if you can't do that, you don't belong here. You are not smart enough to be here. If you cannot wrap your head around the idea that the fact that they have straight fucking white men at half of their fucking, like they're half of the attendees at their fucking events and no one cares. Yes, bro, it is nuts. It is nuts that you are so fucking retarded that you cannot understand that they do not give a flying fuck that you are a straight white man. This is a you problem. This is a you problem because it is now part of your fucking identity to be a poor victim of the world because you're a straight white man and all your conservative influencers have fed into your brain. Yes, 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 the left wants to victimize you because you are a straight white man. We can go back and forth about this all day. I will continue to call you a retard. I will continue to say that if this is your mentality that these people victimize straight white men, that is fucking retarded and completely unhinged from fucking reality. And if you keep coming back with this bullshit, I'm going to say, I'm very sorry, AJ, you are not smart enough to be in my audience and I'm going to fucking remove you. Why can't you answer the question of why is it that there are so many straight white male socialists if they are just victimizing fucking straight white men all the time? Why can't you answer that question? I'm going to wait. We're going to wait and see. AJ, if your claim is that they victimize straight white men, then why are there so fucking many straight white male socialists who are involved in their events, who are involved in their organizations, who run some of their fucking organizations, and no one fucking cares. Why is that? I will wait here for your fucking answer. We're waiting. AJ. Is AJ still here? Did we drive him away? Okay, so now we know that AJ is a fucking retard and AJ is no longer welcome here. Goodbye, AJ. I'm not dealing with that shit. AJ's been banned. Goodbye. Rottweiler, Glenn Lowry, Thomas Sowell, Larry Elder, any rapper richer than God. None of them are white. Why do they hate them? Get a fucking grip, you conservative fucking retards. But AJ has now been removed and permanently banned from the chat, so we don't have to deal with that shit anymore. Because I'm sorry, he was too fucking stupid to be here. Given many chances, over and over and over again, too fucking stupid to be here. Goodbye. We're only 20 minutes into this fucking presentation. Already conservatives have derailed the entire fucking thing.
Place, we find the workspace of the people channeled into a carceral site in order to farm for the state, hence reference to the chicken house in the poem, or in the poem, the OC has cows. Although most of
fucking straight white male conservatives want to be victims of the world, I will treat them as though they are fucking victims of the world, and then I will out-masculine them with my fucking toxic masculinity every fucking day of the week. These people are so fucking ridiculous. And I'm sorry, I'm going on a little rant here. It's my show. I'll do what I want. All of these fucking conservatives who complain about this all the time, they're the most feminine, complainy fucking men I've ever seen in my fucking life. How is it possible that conservatives are the saviors of straight white men when I can out fucking toxic masculinity them every fucking day of the fucking week? God damn it.
Her language is garish. She embraces what's called a radical rudeness in protest of the state. It's within the subtlety that Niancy best shows us how the criminal legal system has formed in order to sequester and exploit those in positions that the state imagines as unproductive. The poor, the political dissenter, and the minority are corralled into these spaces and forced into productivity through the creation of sellable goods or into political, social, and physical death. Niancy explores all of these examples in her musings. What is perverse is not the sexual or intimate desire that women experience in their desperate seeking of human connection, but the fact that humanity is stripped from them by those in power who were sanctioned by the state to enact immoral and unreasonable harm on others. As we can see in poems titled Murder Convicts Lead Us, or Beautiful Nana, or
Karen seems to think that that the DSA are who we're listening to right now, which is another example of how conservatives, this is not even going to be about this presentation anymore. We've descended that because conservatives are fucking ruining shit again. Karen, these are not democratic socialists. These people are real socialists. Real socialists don't even like democratic socialists. And also, you're telling me that you've actually never been to a democratic socialist event because democratic socialists don't like Jews. These people don't like Jews either. So continue to lie, conservatives. Continue to lie to yourself because you've never actually gone out and experienced this stuff in the real world. You don't actually listen to what these people say. Karen, democratic socialists are not the far left. Jesus fucking Christ.
Actually, there's a poem that's called Prison is a Fuck. Pardon anyone's French.
Yeah, where are these fucking retards coming from today?
You can see
this
that
is
parallel
ridiculous.
made most explicitly.
We're like trying to do real shit and
universal
conservatives are
truth
fucking
of
everything up
prisons
again.
examined through a Ugandan lens, where people with so much to offer are entrapped, degraded, and used to create products from which they cannot themselves benefit. They're left to deal with the full-scale degradation of the maximum security prison, where health provisions and food become currencies that arise from the context of total deprivation. Poems that show this are titled Menstrual Pads Are Currency, or Two Mandazis Only. The women engaged rely on each other for everything from sanitary napkins to pest control to firewood to entertainment to intimacy. I want to turn to this poem called Intersex in Prison to reflect on the institutional confusion of gender. This is excerpted as well. So for the full one, I'm just going to go ahead and say you have to buy this book. It's available as ebook. It's fantastic. So she says, "You, my friend, confuse their brains. You walk like a man with swagger, but reside in a woman's prison. You flirt harder than most men I know, but bear your shame like a first wife. You cut your hair like a man, but you groom your fingernails like a woman. Your family wronged you with that surgery. You smile when..."
Karen, this is actually provably not true if you spend any time on their website at all. Provably not true. Bring your fucking receipts, bitch. They don't like the Jews. Are there some Jews who are their authors? Yeah, but they're not practicing Jews in the way that you think of it. So bring your fucking receipts. This is a fucking groiper right here. This person's name isn't even real because they're fucking trying to mock Jews with their name. This is like a young teenage fucking 20-something man. Bring your fucking receipts. And the fact that you don't know the difference between the DSA and the real socialists doesn't bode well for you. Jesus Christ. Like, this is what the groipers do. This is like, the groipers just like, they make shit up. And then they're like, "Why don't you believe me?" I'm like, "Have you given me any receipts?" They're like, well, I said so. I swear. Trust me, bro. Pinky swear. This is what this is going to be like today. I have looked at their featured author list. Have you looked at their full author list? Have you looked at the whole fucking list? Because I've been to their conference, bitch. I've been in their bookstore. I've met their fucking authors. I track Haymarket Books closer than anyone else on the internet. But you went on a website and you saw a couple featured authors on a website. You've never been to any of their events. You've never actually listened to their authors. You've never seen their full author list. Karen, you fucking talk to me when you go undercover at their fucking conference. And I don't want to hear another fucking word from you until you go undercover at their socialism conference, which I did in September. Fucking retarded fucking groipers. I swear to God.
I call you my son, a child born with both a penis and vulva. Your intersexuality mesmerizes me. A man, a woman.
We are not even half an hour into this presentation yet, and retarded fucking conservatives have derailed the whole thing. Karen is now banned from the chat. Like, I'm not going to pay attention to these people anymore. If I get any more retarded bullshit in the chat, I'm just going to ban you. No fucking warning, no fucking timeout. I am sick of this shit. We are actually trying to listen to what these people are saying, constantly being interrupted by retards who are just shit posting in the chat.
Woman, a fabulous person, how you confuse gender rigidities. Your intersexuality confounds certainties, ends up confusing the gender lines in prison. This institution cannot understand you. You are intersex in prison. I want to argue that the mislabeling of womanhood and its various supposed accompaniments is actually a greater plot than the specific point that the institution cannot understand her intersex prison mate. It becomes obvious that the institution doesn't understand, read, know how to manage or treat humanely anyone, as even she is mislabeled postmenopausal rather than sexual or reproductive. In light of the distribution or lack thereof of resources to prisoners, those inherently imagined as disposable by the state, Dr. Niansi experienced both the blockage of antenatal care and the lack of sanitary pads due to this mislabeling. If reproductive capacity is imagined as so central to womanhood, then the institution couldn't understand her gender either. This mislabeling actually led to death in January 2019. Her grief on vivid display through her words, we witness her miscarriage of justice, which is the unborn child that she lost on the prison floor between the protective coverings of other prisoners who forged shields from blankets and scraps of toilet paper. She laments that.
How did she get pregnant if she was in a woman's prison having a relationship with a woman? That makes no sense at all.
Her dead child was roughly disposed of along with biohazardous medical refuse interspersed with syringes, gloves, and cotton wool. She cuts off her dreadlocks to pay her respects, quite literally left with discharging pieces of herself, because what remains when all else is taken? The act,
guys, trans women can't get pregnant,
symbolizes the carceral abuse that deprives the life of generations of Africans around the world. This connection she actually calls to in several poems, and I think is particularly striking because her words are very reminiscent of other women who were political prisoners, including Assata Shakur and some of the poetry that she wrote in her book. It's other prisoners who were able to mourn with her and that she mourns with in many other accounts of death throughout the book. Their collective power is made evident by their survival, and a queer intimacy is created by that survival. Niansi's writing reflects Audre Lorde's words in A Litany for Survival, where Audre Lorde says, and when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent,
the
we're
slime
still
was
afraid.
supposed to make me less mad.
So it's better to
the
speak
slime
remembering
is failing today.
we were never meant to survive. No Roses from My Mouth, taken as a whole, I think offers a really devastating but hopeful but rich, provocative, and ultimately queer account from of prisons, with particular focus on gender, poverty, the inherent corruption of criminalization, and the ultimate subversion performed by prisoners, which is triumph through collectivity, comradeship, and survival through togetherness. I'll close out from there, and I think toward the end we'll be able to maybe talk through some of these parallels. Thank you.
I don't even know what this person just said. I'm too distracted by nonsense.
Okay, hello everyone. So I just want to thank SM for the invitation and also my co-panelists for their brilliance, really. So I'm just going to dive right in. So my talk today is titled Black Trans Ether Toward a Kind of Gender Abolition. And it draws from two book projects, the one on Black trans feminism, currently under contract, and another on the relationship between Blackness and the category of cisgender, which is in the final stages of being written. Section 1. I'm not sure I am, or if I must be, want to be any particular gender. They tell me with clarity and verve, with the coercive function and lexical of feminists old and misogynists new and old, that I and all of us must be and are men and women. To deem ourselves otherwise is an injustice. To deem ourselves otherwise is naive and attempted absolution. It seems to me and those with whom I am in intellectual and socio-political coalition that the notion of identity is the project of a philosophical tradition invested in ownership, in exclusion, in immutability, and its tethers to fixing knowledge, not to mention cis-normative white supremacist heteropatriarchy, or you are this thing that we tell you you are, a thing in hierarchical relation, a thing in mutually exclusionary relation. Identity, in the way we often understand and champion it, is a result of a carceral project of individuation, the name for individuation's nominalization. To the extent that identity disallows coalition in engendering precisely the kind of radical world to which we call out, is the extent to which we must force.
You know why I'm really angry? And like, I thought this was going to be a new year. I was like, you're going to be nicer to people in your chat that like, and I'm sorry, I'm going to like, this is my fucking chat, so I'll take a tangent if I want to. Like, do you know why I'm really angry? This is like advanced stuff. And there are a lot of people who have been watching me long enough that we should be able to like sit down and be able to watch more advanced content and challenge ourselves with the more advanced content to understand it, to dissect it, to pull it apart. But I have to spend my time explaining the fucking same thing over and over and over and over and over again because conservatives in my chat refuse to fucking listen. And they can't get over the cognitive dissonance that's being created by their influencers telling them that straight white people are the poor victims of the fucking left. And it's like every single time we sit down to try to do something more advanced, these people come in and even if they've been watching my content for months and they've heard me say whiteness is capitalism 112 times, and they've been corrected by the chat over and over and over again, they just don't listen. And so we can't get to the more advanced stuff because I'm constantly having to deal with people who damn well should know better. Damn well should know better. Eddie, I have no idea. I don't read the New York Times and I don't plan to. And it's like, I don't know. I truly don't know how to explain it other than to continue to say the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. I don't know. It is so frustrating. And so if I'm angry, it's because this is, I mean, I put myself in this position, man. I have to take responsibility for it. But sometimes all I want to do is go beyond saying the same fucking thing over and 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 over again. And it's like I try to do that. And the conservatives are like, no, white people are victims. White people are victims. Come back. We need to go back to how white people are victims of the world, Carlin. Why can't you talk about that, even though I haven't been talking about that for years? I don't mind answering questions, but it's like I truly and sincerely do not understand how people can come to my streams repeatedly for months and not fucking listen to any of it. What are you guys doing? Honestly, why are you here? There's way more entertaining content to watch other places on the internet. If you aren't here to learn, then what the fuck are you doing here? I'm a raging bitch. I'm not a fun person to watch stream. Like, what the fuck are you doing here if you're not trying to learn this stuff? I don't care if you go. I don't care about my numbers. I care about being able to use this as opportunities to research, to find stuff like this on the internet that I can put on my Substack because I don't make my money from fucking YouTube. So you guys can go. You don't have to be here on my account. If you don't want to listen and you don't want to learn and you just want to cause problems and you just want to whine and complain every single time you get an answer that you don't like and dig in your heels to believe white men are really the poor victims of the world, like, go do something else, bro.
Safety identificatory project. Such a project prohibits abolitionary strivings on the ground that identity is the subjective instantiation, the coercively bestowed coveted possession of the onto-epistemic project toward which abolition stands as antithetical. The Black and trans of this matter cannot abide such classificatory violences, so it urges us to abolish too the categories we may love, even if they have not always been received well. If the aim of the radical project.
Joey wants to know, is cis-normative, well, it's going to be, cis-normative, white supremacist, heteropatriarchy just a long-winded term for capitalism? Yes, correct. Because cis, well, I guess I can do that. Cis is the opposite of queer. So that's going to be like cis-normative basically means the same thing. White supremacist means capitalism. Anything normative is capitalism. Hetero means, it means like, again, it's like the opposite of queer, but they don't like homonormative either. So this could also be cis-normative white supremacist homo-patriarchy or cis-homonormative white supremacist patriarchy. Patriarchy is a reference to the gender binary, which they believe was created by capitalism. So there's nuance between the terms. It's not like all of them just mean capitalism, capitalism, capitalism. There's nuance in it. They mean capitalism from different angles, but basically it all goes back to capitalism.
Of Blackness and transness is abolition, it is imperative to grapple with what that actually means. We cannot half-ass abolition, holding on to some of the things we didn't think we would be called out for needing to give up. The project at hand is interested in a thoroughgoing.
They don't all mean capitalism. They don't all mean straight capitalism, though. Again, so patriarchy is a reference. They don't all just mean capitalism, guys. This is just like shorthand. When I say it's capitalism, it's shorthand, okay? Patriarchy is a reference to capitalism because they believe capitalism created the gender binary. Another word for the gender binary is the patriarchy. Hetero or homonormativity is a reference to capitalism that comes out of queer theory because they believe that queer is about destabilizing the system being capitalism. Normative is capitalism, it's private property ownership. And so heteronormativity, homonormativity is a reference to capitalism because like anything that's not normative is queer, which is about destabilizing normativity. White supremacy is a reference to capitalism because they believe that capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership, created slavery. Slavery created systemic racism. Systemic racism is another term for capitalism. The only way to solve for systemic racism and the inequities that it creates in society is to abolish capitalism. That's why that's there. Cis is the opposite of queer. We already talked about that. So it's not as though they don't all mean capitalism in the same way. And it's important to understand that. Okay? It's important to understand that it's not just like enough to say capitalism. You have to understand why it means capitalism and how it translates back to capitalism. Mama, I'm not going to answer that. I'm not going, you know better. Or you should know better. It's not that everything is, we're not even going to get through this fucking presentation today. It's not that everything is capitalism, but rather those are created and upheld by capitalism because capitalism is the root of all problems. Does everyone understand?
Conception of freeness, and it seems like abolition, to call on Saidiya Hartman, quote, makes everyone freer than they actually want to be, unquote. We are not to capitulate to a sort of abolished world because some people who may look like us or the people who have been forged in oppression are pleading to us. We still, even when grandma doesn't think she wants it, work to abolish the world. This is what abolition as an orientation toward radical freedom commits to. And that will not be easy, nor will it feel good in the ways that we expect. If this talk is titled Black Trans Ether, it is because I am thinking Blackness as para-ontologically distinct from Black people, drawing on Fred Moten, Naomi Chandler, and J. Cameron Carter, which makes Blackness a penchant in disposition and irreverent relation to categorization and captivity. As mutinous relation to imposed ontology, Blackness enables and conditions the inhabited spirit of subjective abolition, the eradication of a fundamental axis of the self. Transness, in turn, always shadowed by its echolalic Blackness, unfixes gender from essentialist moorings and posits itself precisely as that unfixation, as a departure from, without the presumption of a stable destination, or indeed a departure that itself destabilizes destinational desires. This transness is endemic to a genealogy that has at its foundation the fundamental critique of the capaciousness of man and woman, and as such, the critique of the regulative regime of normative gender and categorization, which is to say, gender as such. Black and trans reference movement and cultivate space.
I need to listen to this again. I'm sorry. He did a lot of word salad there, but I feel like there's a nugget in there that I need to understand in regards to like gender normativity and all that bullshit. I just need to listen to it again.
Self. Transness, in turn, always shadowed by its echolalic Blackness, unfixes gender from essentialist moorings and posits itself precisely as that unfixation, as a departure from, without the presumption of a stable destination, or indeed a departure that itself destabilizes destinational desires. This transness is endemic to a genealogy that has at its foundation the fundamental critique of the capaciousness of man and woman, and as such, the critique of the regulative regime of normative gender and categorization, which is to say, gender as such. Black and trans reference movement and cultivate space to live.
I agree,
to become
Rottweiler.
as being in this movement. It becomes necessary that we retool the language of approaching gender and its abolition, an abolition that is concerned much more with the creation and cultivation.
Whoa. Hang on. He just said, so what he's talking about is like he's basically railing against the gender binary. Because and then he says, yeah, this is a clip. He basically says we need to use language to rail against the gender binary sort of thing. I just want to listen to this one more time before I do the clip because I want to make sure I understand what he's saying.
Movement and cultivate space to live, to become as being in this movement. It becomes necessary that we retool the language of approaching gender and its abolition, an abolition that is concerned much more with the creation and cultivation of a new way to exist than with incessantly referencing and the purportedly bad iteration of gender, e.g. toxic masculinity.
Oh! Toxic masculinity is the patriarchy. So he's saying that we need to retool the language in regards to abolishing gender, because if we don't retool the he's basically saying like they're using coded language in reference to gender. So let's just clip that and I can figure out what to do with it later.
And categorization, which is to say, gender as such. Black and trans reference movement and cultivate space to live, to become as being in this movement. It becomes necessary that we retool the language of approaching gender and its abolition, an abolition that is concerned much more with the creation and cultivation of a new way to exist than with incessantly referencing and the purportedly bad iteration of gender, e.g. toxic masculinity. Abolition means just that, and Black and trans ether stands here for gender abolition, even in the face of those who would, as they say, feel some type of way about gender abolition after they worked so tirelessly to gain recognition or validity in their own, often historically marginalized gender. Black and trans ether.
So what he's saying, and I'm just going to get this clip. What he's saying is that we need to abolish gender because gender perpetuates systems of toxic masculinity. And we need to do that, even though some people are going to have feelings about that. He's referencing women when he says that. He's basically saying that, listen, some women have worked for a really long time to get recognition for being women and rights for women. And so those women who have done that for a really long time might have feelings about the fact that we need to abolish gender, but we just need to do it because any system that perpetuates the gender binary is going to perpetuate a system of toxic masculinity, the patriarchy, et cetera, et cetera. Exactly. He's saying the feminists might be mad about this, but that doesn't mean we don't do it.
Must respond to the expected question, even my gender, even progressive masculinities and innocent femininities, with an understanding but assured yes. And it is in service of racialized and gender justice because gender abolition gratuitously expands the ambit through which subjects might become subjects in ways that do not carry with them the normativities of worlds and histories past, which then means we will have the possibility to become something or some things that have never been permitted to arise. And we would not have gotten to these things if we did not unequivocally, searingly.
If we don't abolish the gender binary, then we'll never get to be Zims and Zers and Z's and Zays and bog gender and fey gender and deer gender and all of these things. Because if we didn't abolish the gender binary, these crazy neo pronouns and the infinite array of genders would never be allowed to exist.
Refuse the coerced regime of gender we had no choice but to exist as. When we refuse this, we make possible the very thing the regime sought to preemptively and post hoc quell. Section 2. I want to belong somewhere, Mackenzie Wark says in a trans gesture that reckons with how her transness necessitates the obliteration of what has become the being onto which her transness is cast. But I don't want an identity, she concludes. The very notion of identity is a philosophical project that has held sovereign sway over how we've understood what is possible for us. There is an obsession with how to pin down, how to get at the fundamental element, how to not have to think about being something else at the heart of the Westphalian international order, this political and philosophical project of sovereignty. We can be without making recourse to the paltry scraps we've been given, like a bad flight offering only chicken or fish when we've been vegan for a while now. What would it be like to have food that sustains us, food we can eat, food that is not predicated on the slaughtering of others? Identity is an apparatus of legibilizing, of interpolating, requires that those for whom the identity is definitional only be in as much as they measure up to the identity and, most crucially, do not permit themselves to be other than the identity, which commits an atrocious monopolizing of how one can emerge as a subject. There is an immeasurable array of wondrous things I might have come into the world, which is not to say that my physiognomy is infinitely mutable, but that my physiognomy is always subject to being read, a reading that is vastly contingent on what is discursively and historically permissible, which claims the very meaning, the very contour of me as existing. To be given an identity, which is always the causal relation where we are thrown into a terrain we are forced to struggle with, is to be disallowed from the jump, the other things in the array of possibilities. It is because identity is invoked as an immutable possession, what we simply are, obscuring its construction. So I promote abolition as of one of the vectors of identity, gender, or at the very least, something like gender abolition, which is to say, quote, it's an abolition of sovereignty. It's an abolition of a certain horrible and brutal individuated notion of freedom. And it's an abolition of the world that is constructed on that conceptual framework, unquote, as Fred Moten writes. It may not be about erecting something at all. it may be much more fruitful and interesting to think of how we can come to something like gender abolition through something, how we might come to something like gender through something like gender abolition, through, as it were, a project not of putting things together, but of viewing with soft eyes, feeling with humbled breath the gloriousness of how things fall apart. And the shards lying there is a mosaic of pieces you can pick up and carry with you, fondling it in your hands, tucking it in your pocket, only to discard it later. Or you can stomp on the shards, grinding them into smaller pieces, awing at their disintegration. Or further still, you can step over the pile, walking into the sunset. Section 3. There are objections, of course. There are those who have castigated gender abolition as a super white fantasy inattentive to the effects of racialization on gender, and indeed the love, say, a Black woman might have of her gender. How dare the gender abolitionists say that we should abolish gender from the Black woman on the assumption that they are.
I mean, they're pretty explicitly saying that they want to abolish gender. I just don't know how people can't understand this. They want to get rid of all men and all women. And they're saying some women might have feelings about that, some men might have feelings about that, but they want to get rid of all gender entirely. Does everyone understand that in the chat? This is why that retarded conservative earlier needed to go. Because it's like, you want to think that white men are victims of the world? How can white men possibly be the greatest victims in the world according to the left, when the left wants to abolish gender entirely? They don't just want to abolish men. They don't want a matriarchy. Even fucking Naptown, I love that you're dropping in every once in a while to watch socialism with us when we're not doing bullshit drama, which I'm not going to be doing anymore. So I appreciate you still dropping by. They don't want to abolish men. They don't want to abolish women. They want to abolish all gender entirely. Tayton, if you queer masculinity, then you have effectively abolished the gender binary. Well, no, I don't agree with that, Tayton. You can then move on to the nuclear family. I don't agree with it. This is not about queering masculinity. That is not what this is about. This is about getting rid of the gender binary. That does not just involve queering masculinity. So I do appreciate the super chat, but that is not what this is about. And the reason I'm being so hard on this, Tayton, is that when you say it like this, do you know how retarded fucking conservatives are going to interpret this? They hate men. Men are the victims. They want to get rid of men. They want a matriarchy. That's how conservatives are going to interpret this. So I'm being hard on you because you're really into this stuff, and I want you to understand the ramifications of how you're explaining it in this way. This is not just about masculinity. This is about all gender. Kansas Mama, I need you to answer your own question because, again, you've been around long enough where you should know the answer to this. And I'm a bit concerned that you're even asking this question in the first place. What would we be called if there were no genders? This is obvious. What would they be? What would people be called if there was no gender? If the gender binary was abolished and there was no gender, what would they be called? I'm seeing some comrades in the chat. That's correct, but that's not the answer I'm looking for. Nope, it's not Zer. It's not Zer. That's not what it is. If there is no gender binary, then what would people be? I cannot believe that no one is fucking getting this. Guys, everyone in my chat has gone full retard today. I swear to God. If there is no binary, then what are people going to be called? There is no binary. Fucking non-binary. That's what non-binary is. Non-binary is the abolition of the gender binary. That's what that means. non-binary. This is why we say queer is a far left political ideology. This is why every time you see a non-binary person, I don't care if they also identify as trans, they're not really trans, they're talking about queer. Non-binary.
Are cisgender and have the capacity to house a fetus finally begins to understand the
Fender
gifts
Bean, you
of her
did say that, and
capacity
I
as
did
more
see
than
it.
a
I was hoping other
damnation
people would
to
pick up
birthing
on it, so
chattel.
credit to you.
How dare the gender abolitionists say that we should abolish gender when there are Black women loving Black women primarily on the grounds that they are Black women? And these, I assure you, are quite serious accusations, accusations that cannot and must not be waved off as uninformed. These accusations require that we tarry with the discomfiture they lay bare. Where some tout the alternative of a more humble gender democratization, others tout gender abolition as colonization. As many of those who
Really?
advocate for gender abolition are white, there is the thought that because of this, the conceptual framework propelling it is an extension of colonization efforts to proliferate whiteness. To say that
Oh!
gender is socially
Wait. We basically just got him saying that white and colonization mean the same thing. Let's listen again.
the alternative of a more humble gender democratization, others tout gender abolition as colonization. As many of those who advocate for gender abolition are white, there is the
Capitalist.
thought that because of this, the conceptual framework propelling it is an extension of colonization efforts to proliferate whiteness. To say that
An extension of colonization efforts to proliferate whiteness. Do you guys see how both white and colonization are references to capitalism? And now he's saying that colonization proliferates whiteness. Do you guys see that? Does everyone get it? Colonization and whiteness mean the same thing. One proliferates the other. The endpoint is the same.
gender is socially constructed is to deprive it of its staying power, but a power that is historically variable in its constancy. We societally have placed importance in gender, have given it a category, have held it dear to us over centuries. If we then go out evangelizing the abolition of gender, we're intervening in worlds and cultures we ought not to, and spreading the doctrine of a troublesome creed. Writes Lola Phoenix in a piece titled Gender Abolition as Colonization, quote, "The problem with abolishing gender is that not only do we have to define it, apply our definition toward other cultures, demand they remove gender from their own race, cultural, spiritual, or whatever background, but also assume that the abolition of the concept of gender will result in equality or a lack of discrimination. In doing so, from a white perspective, we effectively create a colonizing project wherein we're intervening in their own identities, behaviors, and practices in an attempt to make their lives better," unquote. Contra gender abolition, everyone's gender is okay as long as it doesn't hurt anyone. Everyone's gender is valid. Everyone's understanding of their gender is totally okay because it's their lived experience. And all of this at some point in my life seemed pristinely sensible. I need to push back on this prevailing discourse in the circles I traverse only because there is sedimenting within them a troubling liberalism manifesting as incessant uncriticality.
A troubling liberalism manifesting as incessant uncriticality. This is the second time they've shit on liberalism in this presentation. Have they shit on conservatism in this presentation? No, they're shitting on liberalism in this presentation because socialists do not like liberals.
Prevailing discourse in the circles I traverse only because there is sedimenting within them a troubling liberalism manifesting as incessant uncriticality. Such a pervasive liberalism, which is not to say radicalism or leftism, quote, is mostly just an appeal to maintain the status quo since hurting
Oh my god, that's a clip. That was fucking beautiful. He just distinguished between liberalism and leftism or radicalism, because anytime you hear the word radical, when it comes from a socialist, that's a reference to socialism. It's a reference to like radical politics. Other groups use radical too, but like when you hear a leftist use it, it's a reference to socialism. Let's get that clip. That was great. Kansas Mama, I'm really starting to think that you're trolling. And that pisses me off. Liberals are too close to capitalism and are not socialists. Socialists do not like liberals. This is why every time a conservative says liberals are socialists or Democrats are socialists, they're fucking retarded and they don't know what they're fucking talking about. Hang on, I need to clip that.
To push back on this prevailing discourse in the circles I traverse only because there is sedimenting within them a troubling liberalism manifesting as incessant uncriticality. Such a pervasive liberalism, which is not to say radicalism or leftism, quote, is mostly just an appeal to maintain the status quo, since hurting others gets defined as doing anything that upsets the privileged class, unquote, a manner of engagement that cannot make sense of the kind of trans radicalism someone like Kai Cheng Tom, from whom I take this quote, yearns to gift us with. The sentiment is often that the categories, whatever they are always good because you say your experience has been such that you have a sense of yourself thanks to gender. Don't you dare take that away from me.
Okay,
but I must depart. This is not a mainstream feminist project where what is striven for is equality of the sexes, nor is this a project that simply attempts to liberate women from men. I would wager that what I am slowly articulating on vibratory decibels is in fact something like gender abolition, a formulation not beholden to a definitive account of what gender abolition is. It is a provisional yet no less radically committed endeavor to inflect gender abolition, to signal it without pinning it down, for in its abolitionary ethereal bones is an anti-categoricality, A-N-T-E, that refuses even its own nominative. That I am looking for language to characterize something like gender abolition attests to a lack of interest in trying to define the world or mandate how the world should be. It is such that it cannot promote the world's categorization. Also, it cannot promote a relativism that permits any and all categorizations simply for the sake of remaining pure. There can still be belonging, ethics, and the upholding of an ethics of non-violation, and it is in the pursuit of the anti-categorical where this might happen. The abolition of concern here, for me, is an anarchic refusal of the system and all its placating offerings, inclusions, rights, finances, whatever it must in order to preserve itself, to remove itself from scrutiny. We cannot be seduced, as difficult as it very well is, by the many iterations of better. Quote, we need an imagination that overreaches immediate issues of safety, rights, and health, not because these things don't matter, but rather because formal rights and structured oppression can happily coexist. Regimes of neoliberal democracies have increasingly sought to absorb the claims of oppressed people into a more effective tool of domination. We should be deeply skeptical of placing value in the acquisition of formal rights when they are used to incorporate people in the legitimation of a violent border regime. The fact that feminism and LGBT rights are used as ideological lubrication for imperialism and colonialism, aided and abetted by the calcified remnants of social movements, does not end oppression, but successfully refashions it, unquote. And that is a quote from Solveig Gore's essay subtitled Toward a Cyborg Transfeminist.
He just said, essentially, that liberal movements that have been like the gay marriage stuff or like things like that are essentially like, God, I don't know exactly how to phrase this, but he basically just said like these movements never actually accomplished what we wanted to accomplish, and they're just like husks of themselves. Did everyone just hear what they're the dead remnants? They're acknowledging that there are dead remnants of those movements. I just want to listen to that again.
The fact that feminism and LGBT rights are used as ideological lubrication for imperialism and colonialism, aided and abetted by the calcified remnants of social movements, does not end oppression, but successfully refashions it, unquote. And that is a quote from Solvi Gore's essay subtitled Toward a Cyborg Transfeminism.
He's saying that they hijacked the movements. He's saying that they hijacked like the feminist and the LGBT rights movement, because they weren't, those movements weren't going where they wanted them to go, and so they hijacked them. Not in the way that you're thinking of collective consciousness.
Seeking more rights is not abolition. Seeking inclusion and fairness within the system is not abolition. Seeking the reversal of the hierarchies is not abolition, and seeking individuality is not abolition.
Reversal of the hierarchies,
we are not
they
to
hate
seek
hierarchy.
The reform of the system, as it is the system that orchestrated this mess. We seek, in no uncertain terms, abolition of the system.
Everyone hear that? We do not seek the reform of the system because the system is what got us into this mess. We seek the abolition of the system, and the system is capitalism. Let me just clip that real quick. And I know people are saying there's static when I'm clipping things. I don't hear static, so the static will not show up in my clip. So I'm sorry if you're hearing static. I don't hear it.
The reversal of the hierarchies is not abolition, and seeking individuality is not abolition.
Oh shit.
Of the hierarchy.
I didn't even hear that. He just said seeking individuality is not abolition. I'm going to go back a little farther. Not there.
Feminism. Seeking more rights is not abolition. Seeking inclusion and fairness within the system is not abolition. Seeking the reversal of the hierarchies is not abolition, and seeking individuality is not abolition. We are not to seek the reform of the system, as it is the system that orchestrated this mess. We seek, in no uncertain terms, abolition of the system. We have all this discourse on.
That was one of the most clear things this guy has said in the whole time. Let me just get that clip. Hang on.
Policing as deleterious to the well-being.
I'm not ready for you to proceed yet. I want to make sure the clip is saved. I'm like using all the No! I think I just blew up my StreamYard. I think my StreamYard just shut down. Hang on. I need to make sure I can recover my fucking files. Hang on. I had a lot of shit I still needed to clip. Please recover my files. I made one clip too many. I shut all these files down the other day. I don't know why. Hang on. This is just going to take a second, guys. While my StreamYard reloads and hopefully I recover my files I was working on earlier. Murphy's Pool, thank you for the super chat. 2 years of being subscribed to your channel thanks to Jack Murphy. What is Jack Murphy doing these days? Does anyone know? Poor Jack Murphy got his porn released on the internet. Porn that he put on the internet in the first place. Let that be a lesson to you. Okay, so I'm getting some of my files back. Hang on. My StreamYard is working hard to deliver me back my files. Okay, that's good that I have that file. Okay, thank God. Oh, shit. The big file I was looking for are clips that I was still making from yesterday's presentation. And I was like, I wasn't done clipping that yet. Don't fucking delete it. Okay, hang on. I just need to let it load and then I need to shut a bunch of shit down. So guys, thank you for bearing with me. I appreciate it. Seriously though, whatever happened to Jack Murphy? I think I just got my clip. Okay, I've still got my clips that I've been making. Okay. Oh, shit. Okay, hang on. I've still got the little spinny wheel, so I'm letting the spinny wheel go until I don't have the spinny wheel anymore. I don't want another crash of my editing software. Hang on. I mean, Jack Murphy was kind of an asshole, so I'm not actually like. I think that like it is a shame what happens to some creators. I'm still getting like the spinning wheel of death from my StreamYard, which is why I'm not saying anything yet. Oh God, why can't I just? I think the last clip is okay. I'm just trying to minimize stuff. That can go. Hang on. That can go. Blank. Don't save. I only have 45 files opened up in my StreamYard. I just don't know why my StreamYard collapsed. I only have 45 files open. Only 45. I need a new computer. Hang on, I'm almost there, guys. Almost there. That got saved. That's good. This can go. Don't save. Don't save. Oh my God. Okay. We can keep playing now. Thank you for bearing with me.
Of our communities, and as radical abolitionists, we demand the end of policing. If we are to live this assertion to really be about that life, it is crucial to heed an ameliorative and abolitionist politics toward the ways that gender is policed, which is not merely to say that certain ways genders are derogated over or against others that are permitted sovereign sway, but more the ways gender itself functions as an extension and iteration of policing. The chance for no cops and no prisons includes the gender police and gender imprisonment.
Bite your tongue, Naptown. I have a Mac. I don't run Windows.
Required imposition. We are punished
don't
for not
put that
receiving
evil on
the
me.
Terms of the imposition, which puts gender in the realm of the transitive verb to gender, gendering. Then something like gender abolition would just as readily urge an anti-gender disposition as it would urge, like many already do, an anti-racist and anti-capitalist disposition.
Oh!
It is easy enough.
Hello. Say the terms anti-racist and anti-capitalist in the same breath and you'll almost make me come. My God. He knows how to turn me on. I'm clipping that shit. I don't care if my StreamYard crashes or not. Clip. Better not crash StreamYard. Bear with me. This is a quick clip. We don't need to make it do any nonsense.
Receiving on the terms of the imposition, which puts gender in the realm of the transitive verb to gender, gendering, then something like gender abolition would just as readily urge an anti-gender disposition as it would urge, like many already do, an anti-racist and anti-capitalist disposition. It is easy enough to see that the binary and perinatal assignations are impositions, non-consensually given identities that work overwhelmingly to the harm of oneself and others, and as much as such as that violation is the trauma through which one is permitted to exist in the world. So ask me not who I am, what my gender is, and ask me not to verify others. That is the work of the police. And if we are to aspire toward police abolition, toward no...
Ask me not to verify others. That is the work of the police.
New or old jails, it seems to me we are required to take our claims to their end, the abolition, or something like it, of gender. This livable wreckage is where, in a Foucauldian sense, quote, it's not the assertion of identity that's important, unquote. It is where, in Black trans scholar Dora Silva Santana's sense, we are constituted by, quote, a movement of liberation against gendered racialized oppression. It is moving across and along the waters, the imposed limits of gender, unquote. There is another way, or other ways, to live in this world that exhausts the arrangements in place. Thank you.
God.
Powerful. Thank you so much.
Yes, very powerful.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you so much. Please use this time to, if you want to take a break or use the Q&A function, because I feel that 3 talks have been so generative already, and I don't want people to forget what they have to ask, because I'm going to move us into a little bit of a different direction. And also some of my work, I feel complements some of the stuff that was said, and some of it is very much in tension with some of what is said. And so I want to share a little bit of kind of an overview from the upcoming book, which, like SM said, will hopefully, pandemic willing, will happen, materialize itself in a few weeks, perhaps a month or so. And I'm gonna try to share here.
Jack Murphy blocked me when I said that racism against Black people was not better than racism against white people, and that white people shouldn't demand a special kind of racism, and that all racism was bad. And Jack Murphy didn't like being told all racism was bad. I'm like, bro, you think you're taking the high road when white people demand their own specific special racism that is worse than all other forms of racism? I don't think so.
Sharing is caring. All right. All right. So can you see the slides?
We need to get more into disability studies at some point.
So my book, Decarcerating Disability, Deinstitutionalization and Prison Abolition, talks about what we can learn from deinstitutionalization to aid us in understanding prison abolition, or to go towards prison abolition. It also talks about what it can aid us to have a disability analysis to understand abolition more generally, which I think is where my talk is in conversation with Marquise's talk, for example. So when we discuss mass incarceration and decarceration without referring to disability, it really ignores, it does 4 things. One is that ignores the varied locales in which incarceration happens. So incarceration doesn't just happen in prisons, it happens in a variety of facilities which are incredibly carceral, including psych facilities, for example, group homes, nursing homes, and so on. So I literally mean locations of incarceration. I also mean carceral logics, and I'll talk about that later. It also avoids an understanding of disability as an analytic category, and also disability as a way to view the world.
Do you guys mind if I fast forward over this woman and we go to the Q&A and discussion? I just don't know how much more I have in me. I feel like the conservatives from earlier have worn me out, and now I'm getting cranky, and I don't want to listen to this woman talk for half an hour. Does anyone mind? I'm sure she's very smart, but like I just want to go back to the Q&A bit. Oh, wait, look at this. Look at this. Hang on. This is funny. Crip of color. Does everyone know what a crip is? Does everyone know? What do you think a crip is in the chat? This is actually funny. We do need to get into disability studies at some point. I just don't want to do it today. I'm worn out. No, crip is not a gang. Crip is not a gang. Not in this context. Crip means cripple. It means cripple. So in disability studies, the way you get your virtue points is by identifying as a cripple, which they have shortened to crip. So anytime you see crip in this context, it doesn't mean a gang. It means crippled. Okay.
And is also incredibly so impacted them, those who are able, everybody.
We have a number of questions that have come up in Q&A.
Oh, good.
And we have around 13 minutes to answer them. So I actually, well, I'll start. Hopefully this person is still with us. Anonymous attendee did mention that they are in Cape Town right now and it's getting very late. So I do hope that they're still around to hear this answer. Let's see. And so they're asking about a recording of these presentations. And yes, this is this is recorded. It will be available for you to watch, especially if you've missed anything or you want to review anything. The second part of that, though, was to say that they've thoroughly enjoyed all the talks, and they would like to find if your paper is available, if anyone's papers are available today, if they could be made available publicly. And this one is particularly asking for Marquise's paper. With great thanks to all from University of Cape Town. And there's an email address available there. So if you'd like to get in touch. Another also, Dennis specifically asked for Liat's presentation. And so I'll just say that we will make available papers or presentations of any panelist who feels comfortable doing that on the website after the event. But I do want to emphasize that many of the people who are speaking today and sharing are sharing from works that are available or going to be available, as books and otherwise very soon. So please stay in touch. I know that everyone is excited to continue sharing with attendees after this day. Okay, so to get to some of these questions, I'll try and group them like last panel. So Kai, there are 3 that are for you, so I'll just read these for you. To Kai, what thresholds are available to realize what is and isn't survivability, especially say in countries like where I am in India, but not limited to, where the colonial understanding of a sex or gender binary or sex or gender binaries are being pushed by legislation by a right-wing government that actively disenfranchises them. What infrastructure should already be in place for, quote unquote, a beyond survival, and what models of agency cut these thresholds? Then there is one that says, Kai, I love your talk and it's doing amazing work. I'm just wondering how you're framing decolonization and how it relates to Indigenous people's
Good
work
question.
and movement to building their own futurities. And the last one for Kai says, Kai's talk was brilliant. Could they share more about a beautiful term they use, quote, a politics of resurrection? What do you believe are the key elements or language to actively engage in that movement or way of being? Okay, so hold on to those for just 1 second and let me switch.
We're doing ASMR and socialism at the same time.
Sadia Hartman around with apologies. Are we bound to be subjects in ways that we do not consent to? If so, is the non-consensual not also a possibility for imagining otherwise? What I'm trying to ask is, if abolition in Blackness and transness is about movement, where can there be rest? Since I believe rest must be part of any freedom. For Liat, okay, there are a few. In the COVID climate, this seems like it's probably for everybody. In the COVID climate, many of those of us who hold identities in one or more marginalized group are witnessing what we can only label as the horrific revealing of our neighbors' inherent valuing of certain lives over others. Yes. Examples include an acceptance that many of those who are dying are, quote unquote, on their last leg anyways, are elderly, are severely disabled, are people of color, or are people whose behavior has led to their susceptibility. So we should not feel quite so bad about their loss. Do the panelists have opinions on whether a potential outcome of this virus will be a confirming of this institutional system, or that it will lead to progress in this regard and less of a tendency to measure quality of life or relative human value based on ableist, white supremacist, or patriarchal frameworks? Okay. Then for Liat specifically, asking for your presentation. a PDF of your presentation, or at least a section on mass incarceration, which was rather informative. And to Liat, what is a
for those who are confused, this is what socialists do. They read off all the questions and then they respond to the ones that they want to.
Perhaps model of organizing? Okay, thank you all for those questions, and I do hope we can get to those in the next few minutes. Good luck. Anyone who would like to go first?
I'll take a stab at it. So since there's a couple questions, I'll try to shorten it. But in terms of available thresholds, as I mentioned before, coloniality and modernity, they're these two sides of the same coin, and they play out differently depending on your social, cultural, geographic location. And so broadly, I'd say that survivability would be to exist or live life defined as always in the context of death. And so to reconceptualize oneself and one's collectivities around them, to transcend this would be the move. So to do this would be resisting the state through decoloniality. And so you need to question and evaluate all the ways that the legacies of colonialism are
resisting the state through decoloniality means like resisting, like it's basically like resisting the state through decoloniality is what's happening in Palestine right now, except it's not always violent revolution, but it can be.
Embedded in all domains of our existences. And so that is the advice that I would say for pursuing these futurities in outside of a North American context. Locality and collectivity. This kind of goes into what I define decolonization as. So decolonization, quite literally for me, includes burning down all infrastructures, metaphorical or physical, and then you build anew. But the problem with that is that you need the collective to do so, and we can never achieve that.
Oh my God, that was so orgasmic that he said them said the quiet part out loud. Hang on. You can't burn down the system without the collective.
And collectivity. This kind of goes into what I define decolonization as. So decolonization, quite literally for me, includes burning down all infrastructures, metaphorical or physical, and then you build anew. But the problem with that is that you need the collective to do so, and we can never achieve that if the collective doesn't want to do it. So I can't tell you what futurities to aim for, because that's the job of the locality. Also, burning it down and build anew is like kind of my catchphrase, so I think that's funny that you would ask. And so it's the long process of obliteration of all ways of knowing and being that are rooted in legacies of colonialism.
Boom!
And what I've learned from Indigenous scholars are so much. I usually mention indigeneity when I speak about these things and the relationships between Blackness and indigeneity, but I just didn't have that much time. But they've taught me these terms such as radical refusal and reexistence. And reexistence as the constitution of new worlds, away from what coloniality tells you is the normative, right, civil way of doing, being, knowing, living. That's where I get a lot of my inspiration and understanding of Black trans lives beyond survivability. And what they're radically refusing is the loss of land and colonial epistemologies. So I, a couple months ago, went to a Decolonize This Place, it's an organization, rally, and one of the speakers just told all the settlers to leave and get off the land. And that's what that means to me. It's a radical refusal. Okay, and then politics of resurrection. So I will admit that I recently came up with this term, so it's not super developed, but I was alluding to the ways in which we wait until after death to attempt to resurrect the worthiness of Black trans life. It's a method of finding life worlds, but like through understandings of experiences of violence. And so ways to engage in this would be divulging into the ontological states of those who have experienced hardship and then connecting it to the modernities of present day, how it shows up in you today. And I think that's about it. So thank you. Those were great questions.
I can go next. I'll try to keep my response brief. So there were two parts to the question for me. The first one, in terms of, is there a way to kind of utilize the non-consensual in order for kind of otherwise possibilities? I would say absolutely. And I'm drawing on two people for that. One, Fred Moten, who, and I believe it's The Universal Machine, in which he remarks that there are resources working through the epidermalization via Blackness that work toward the anti-epidermalization towards his radical alternative. I think is his exact phrasing in that. So I'm drawing on that for one kind of thinking of this. And then another way I'm thinking about this is via Hortense Spillers. And in the conversation she has on her iconic essay, she remarks that the goal or the aim is to go through gender in order to get to something wider. And that something wider is the thing that I am incredibly interested in. So we have to go through these various kinds of non-consensual impositions that then allow us to get to something in the last instance that is much.
So this person's basically saying, you know, some people, mostly those pesky feminists, are going to have a problem with us getting rid of gender entirely because they worked really hard to get rights for women. But even if they don't consent to us getting rid of gender entirely, we still need to do it and we need to force them to do it. Consent does not matter. And so if we don't force them to do the thing that they have not consented to do, we can't get to the whole wide, bigger world that we have available to us. So basically this like this young Black man is going to try to say to Black feminists, listen, ladies, I know you don't want to give up being Black and being women, but we need to give up being women because it's for your own good. How do you think that's going to go over?
Broader, much more expansive, perhaps even abolitionary than those identificatory projects. So that's the first question.
You don't fuck with Black feminists, man.
In terms of rest, yeah. I never really have a good answer to this, and I need one because it's a very, very important question. And I think an initial response I have in terms of where we might find rest is in coalition, I think. And this is a coalition understood in the vein of someone like Kathy Cohen, and SM kind of alluded to Kathy Cohen in their talk. And this is a queerness that is not predicated on a specific possessed kind of identity or specific kind of sexuality, but rather is a subversive oppositional relation to power. It's very much about how we relate to politics or how we do politics. That is the predicate for the coalition. And that's how I'm understanding coalition. And so I can find rest, I think, in coalition via not having to navigate the various kinds of violences that betide us in the broader world. Coalition provides a space or not even a reprieve, but rather a way to exist to others that are not predicated on hegemonic normative ontological grounds. So in that coalition, we find a way to be encountered that is not preconditioning or circumscribing how we might show up, how we might exist in the world. That, I think, is where we might find a reprieve when we don't have to navigate or insert ourselves into these various kinds of discourses and templates, etc. That's where we find rest. And it's maybe temporary, but that temporary rest, that temporary reprieve, I think allows us to continue to do the radical abolitionist insurrectionary work that I think we're called to do. Yeah.
So I think Marquise just answered the question about the perhaps model of organizing. Thank you. Because I really think that that's what it's about. And another example would be what SM talked about within the poems themselves, but also SM your interpretation or interpolation like of the poems themselves, both in relation to the state, but also in relation to just kind of what we conceive and sometimes don't as queer organizing. So I don't have like a better answer than that. Another example in the deinstitutionalization context was when psych facilities, and especially in residential institutions for people with intellectual disabilities, when people fought to abolish them, there were not alternatives already in place. Right, so this idea that we need to have everything in form or already formed, or we already know there's already in order to do the thing. Really, history shows us that that's not how this works. This is not how kind of massive radical social change happens, and I see deinstitutionalization as that. And I just want to answer about the COVID question really quick. I know we have to wrap up, but I do think like I'm in my apartment, actually in my bedroom, very queer moment. And I think that this is not like a normal conference. I think the COVID moment is a moment that we need to reflect on. I don't think that we know exactly what, and I don't think we should, as I said just now, kind of reflect on exactly what it would mean for the future. But I do think that these networks of mutual aids that are popping up, and even just this conference, for example, are forms that people in the kind of disability world, for example, have been pushing for a really long time. This kind of more not just organizing, within ourselves, which is already what is happening in disability and communities and communities of color and so on, but also to make things online, for example, to allow various modes of participation. And if we can incorporate that in our organizing and activism, I think that would be also really awesome. So that's my hope for the COVID, at least that we don't forget this moment. That this kind of stays with us.
Yeah, I think that take that off. That's awkward.
Yeah.
I think
for
that,
real. They still
Marquise
think COVID is a thing. This was almost 4 years ago.
I think might help us think about this moment, where they said that formal rights and oppression happily coexist in a moment, right? And so as a critique of liberal narratives of progress.
Liberal narratives.
I think that we can hold on to that even while we're talking about this kind of what's happening within the situation of COVID, in that we're experiencing so much institutional oppression. We're experiencing a lot of upward distribution of funds, in seeing how these bailouts are playing out in the country. We are hearing, I think, I've definitely, Julie, I appreciate this question because I have thought about this and kind of grieved a lot when I hear about, the way that disposability is playing out in some of our neighbors' imaginations of, well, yeah, I'm glad that, or, I think recently with the conversation about Florida's beaches reopening, people were like, great, that'll weed out, they actually use a very sanest term, and the idea that it's perfectly fine for people to die en masse because of, seeking the fresh air and the beach is something that's playing out in so many people's imaginations. And it's so incredibly harmful. And so simultaneous to our kind of witnessing of these systemic utterances, we are also, of course, experiencing mutual aid, kind of becoming a conversation within different communities. We are seeing, well, becoming a conversation in communities that weren't previously having that conversation, right? And so seeing ways that transformative or anarchic manifestations, groupings, collectives, etc., are doing this work, is happening at the same time of, this moment of really intense oppression in our economic sphere in the country, but also culturally. And so what I think is really interesting, the connection that I wanted to make to what Marquise had said, was that one thing that we know is not coming out of this moment is any form of abolition. We can experience progress and we can experience change that might be really heartening in some ways, in the ways that communities are taking care.
So remember, this was back, I think it was in April of 2020. Let me just check, hang on. I'm pretty sure this was in April. Yeah, this was in April of 2020. So this person is saying, listen, we ain't getting the socialist revolution during the pandemic. This was this before George Floyd was in May, right? Was George Floyd in May of 2020? And in April, so the lockdown started in like March. And then, so the pandemic, for people who don't remember, the pandemic was interesting in regards to like social. No, Tayton, this wasn't in 2021. This was in 2020. I literally have the date. It was April 23rd of 2020. Exactly. So the pandemic was interesting in regards to social justice woke bullshit, because when the pandemic started, basically the left got like really, really quiet. And it was like an eerie type of quiet. It was like, I don't know if people remember this. I know I definitely remember this. It was like the type of quiet where like, the kids are in the house, but they've gone quiet. And so you're like, what the fuck are they doing? And it's like you go up to the room and you find marker all over the wall, or they're giving the dog a bath in the toilet, or they're doing something crazy. That was the type of like eerie quiet that it was like with the social justice left at the start of the pandemic. And what I think happened is the world had an actual problem. The social justice woke left, they don't operate on actual problems. They have to create problems and make them a big deal so that people give in to their demands so they can facilitate their socialist revolution, because destabilization is part of how they achieve their socialist revolution. But when the pandemic started, I'm talking about before George Floyd, they got really quiet. And it was, I think, because the world had an actual problem. Like, people thought this virus was like the biggest thing ever. And of course, COVID was the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity. No one should ever question that. But like the world had a real problem to deal with. And so the social justice left got really effing quiet, because you can't compare a real problem to their contrived bullshit, right? It just looks inauthentic. And so for months and months and months, they just kind of festered, and they couldn't leave their house. And it was just like they had no like activism they could do, because the entire world was locked down because there was an actual problem. And so this conference happened in April of 2020, and they're saying, listen, man, we're not getting our revolution out of this. Just like, it's not going to happen, guys. We're not going to get our revolution. And then in May, George Floyd died, and boom! It was like they shot out of their houses like out of a cannon, right? It was like all of this pressure for a community that was used to like protesting and creating nonsense and creating problems where there were no problems. They had to like give up their favorite hobby for months and months and months. It was like if they were addicted to cigarettes and you took cigarettes away from them, and then one day you dangle the cigarette in front of them, they were like, "Give me that cigarette." Exactly. When George Floyd died, they blew their load. That's exactly what happened. And then everything went super insane because they had been stuck in their houses for months. They were completely edged and they were fucking ready to go. So I think it's interesting that she's saying in this, like, we're not getting our revolution, guys. And then like a month later, they were like, boom. They took advantage of the crisis to try to facilitate their Marxist revolution.
Of each other and how maybe some of these efforts are proliferating, and yet that is going to quite happily coexist with the really intense bailouts that are happening of the mega rich, and the ableist and classist frameworks that people are working within to kind of reinscribe the disposability of certain bodies in our culture, in our society. There was a question for me, and I just, only because this is coming from someone who is in India, I want to make sure if we don't connect again that I'm able to address it. And so I apologize for missing that beforehand. It's kind of awkward to moderate and be a panelist. But they said, would we want to think about, quote unquote, kisses make us human, and Nyansi's relentless speaking up as on the same side of things, the function of a full mouth, rude and tender, the refusal of one thingness, man, woman, or intersex. I'm wondering if we might want to think about carcerality as the making of one function of things. Say sex for reproduction, woman as ... and so on. And I think, I'm just going to say really briefly, because I do think that this developed later on in the panel, that of course I am imagining gender as serving really carceral functions, collapse of identity, collapse of being able to express oneself or really imagine oneself as free of these kind of colonial dimensions. But at the same time, it's carceral in the more traditional sense of, witnessing or experiencing surveillance, intense punishment, corrections, as Liat brings into her presentation, through forced assimilation and normativization, right? So this idea that you can't express or really even imagine oneself in an expansive way outside of these institutions, and then the way that we are constantly oppressed or forced into a very bounded sense of expression and being. So I will say, yes, of course, I do want to think of carcerality in that way. And also, it sounds like you're a poet. Please keep writing, because that was beautiful. That was a great question. Thank you all for coming. And thank you all to the panelists for being a part of this
We're done.
really amazing.
We're done. We skipped like half an hour, but we made it through. That sucked. Really, 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 really bad. That was like so fucking awful. We're not watching the other one tomorrow. I'll tell you that. We're not watching that shit again tomorrow. I mean, there was a lot of good stuff in it. It was just like so hard. It's like, you see, we need to watch more advanced stuff. We really do. We need to start watching some more advanced stuff. But god damn, like the more of this stuff we watch, we're gonna get better at it, and we're gonna start like really understanding that language too, because this is like we've been doing socialist like 101 or maybe 201 for a while, and like we can't grow, guys, if we don't challenge ourselves. This is like lifting heavier weights at the gym. We've been like bench pressing like 50 like using like 50-pound dumbbells for like a while, and now we're graduating to like 60-pound, and it's a little bit harder, maybe 70-pound, a little bit harder, and like, you know, this is like we need to challenge ourselves. But goddamn, that was hard. I feel like we just had a workout. I yelled at people, I blocked people, I kicked people out for being retarded. I think I said the word retarded more on this stream than I've ever said the word retarded on a stream before in my life. We're upping our game this year, all right? We're no longer fucking around with this 101 bullshit. If we want to maintain our status as people who know more on the internet than any other group of people, we need to fucking work for it. We cannot resting on their laurels is how conservatives have gotten themselves into the predicament that they're in. We don't rest on our laurels. We push past it. All right? So that's the stream for tonight, guys. But I do want to remind everyone that tomorrow at noon, we are doing our second spy stream of the week. And it's going to be about from the noon o'clock hour to about the 3:30-ish hour. And this is only available for supporters. And we are going to go inside a live woke training. And this is going to be a training specifically for white people or people who identify as white. And we're going to watch what happens. And yes, there will be a 5 p.m. stream in general. But if you want to come to Spy Stream tomorrow, then make sure, first of all, you got to make sure you're a subscriber on the Substack, or you could be on Locals, Patreon, Twitter subscriptions, YouTube channel membership. Everyone will get those. But if you have to choose one, I would recommend the Substack, which is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Sign up for a membership, $8 a month, $80 a year. That will get you into all of my special supporter-only streams, like Spy Stream. You never know when a Spy Stream is going to come up. Spy Streams are at the whim of like whenever they're doing these presentations when I find out about it. So we're going to go inside another live woke training tomorrow. I do think it's going to be eventful. It's a really big name organization. Naptown, I have to say, I'm really impressed by you. I didn't expect you to be hanging around for like the socialist stuff. I thought you were just here for the drama, but you're like sticking around, you're learning. Like your Naptown is admonishing my audience when they're not picking up on things quickly enough. I appreciate that. So we're going to do that tomorrow at around the noon o'clock hour. And then we're going to do the stream at 5. And I'm going to pick something a lot easier to watch at 5 because I ain't doing that shit again tomorrow. All right, guys, that's all I've got for right now. Take care. We'll